This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Yes, we'll have newspapers. I get an email at 5:12 a.m. Is Lisa doing newspapers today? I mean, like, what, you know, we're like,
every day.
We don't exist. It's the Lisa show. She'll be along. She's got a Bloomberg Business Flash for you here in a moment. Lots going on today. We're going to have an important conversation later in the program on Russia's future in the Mediterranean off of the Syria debacle. But we're really focused on the markets. Cam Dawson, Eric Friedman, Peter Scheer, the equity markets we'll look at today big time.
And absolutely. And our young friend Kevin Gordon, senior investment strategist
I did
Charles
not know
Schwab.
that.
He's going to be in our studio today, Tom. So we love Kevin
Do you
Gordon.
think they have real Christmas trees at Pepperdine, or is it just all fake
my
trees?
goodness. Yeah.
It's probably
Pepperdine,
like
please.
500 fake trees or that. The other highlight, 7 p.m. tonight, the Duke Blue Devils take on the Incarnate Word
Yes.
Cardinals.
Powerhouse.
Discuss. Is this like a fundraiser? I mean,
I have no idea how this got on the schedule. They're not playing for another week after this, so I don't know. I guess it's exams. I don't know what's going on over there.
So suitable basketball talk for you
Yep.
As well. The VIX at 13 level out to 14.18. First thing I did this morning, looked at the real yield. Really, the 10-year real yield really hasn't moved, 1.96%. Paul, the highlight of the week, the CPI here coming up.
Yeah, we're going to get the CPI tomorrow, Tom, PPI on Thursday. So we'll get a good view of it. Inflation here, I guess, on a ex-food and energy year-on-year, 3.3% is a consensus.
Out on YouTube, you think they can tell a difference?
Sure.
I went into the closet. I tripped over a bag from Fendi.
Yep.
Hit my head on something from Balmain, and I forgot to get a bow tie.
You don't
And
have
I
a spare bow tie here?
I used to have spare bow ties here,
All right,
but I don't.
let's get on top of that. We got to
So,
get a
you
spare,
know,
You need a
spare bow
backup.
ties. A backup bow tie.
Backup bow tie.
It's my look today. I mean, I look like I'm out of a Scorsese
I think
movie.
you let the button rip open. I'm just saying. What do you think,
That's
Lisa?
too much.
Yeah, go a little cash.
They're saying the control room's saying, "Stop talking about your bow ties," and let's do the Bloomberg Business Flash from the Interactive Broker Studios. Our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Well, we've got futures pretty much treading water. Traders looking to that key inflation data this week you were just talking about. Also, they're continuing to monitor that upsurge in geopolitical risk in the Middle East. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 23 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 12. S&P futures, little changed, up about 3. The 2-year yield, 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, and that's up 3 basis points. Taking a global look, the Stocks Europe 600 index, that snapped that 8-day streak of gains. China's top leadership promised looser policy in 2025. It's down about 0.1%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index right now is little changed. We have shares of Oracle down nearly 8%. Quarterly revenue, that was in line in estimates. But here's the thing, investors, they were hoping for more from the company's cloud business. If that pre-market decline holds, Oracle will be set for its biggest fall since December 12th, 2023. All right, move on to shares of NVIDIA. They're looking to extend their losses. You remember we reported that news that China probing the company for alleged anti-monopoly violations. Its shares down 0.5%. And shares of Hershey, they're still higher, up 11%. This was that report yesterday that Mondelez is considering a takeover of the company. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning on YouTube and across the nation on your commute and in New York. Brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise, their insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. We thank BNY for their support. Joining us now, always with a wonderful summary of where this American economy is. We start strong this morning with Kathleen Bostjancic, Chief Economist at Nationwide. Can we sustain our solid economic growth, Kathy?
Good morning, Tom. Well, that's our forecast. We do see a little bit of moderation, but still underlying firm economic growth as we end this year, but and more importantly, going into 2025. What's driving it underneath of it is still a strong labor market. We have some concerns that the job growth is highly concentrated in non-cyclical sectors like healthcare, education, government, leisure and hospitality, typically cyclical, but it's catching up to like its pre-COVID trend. If as long as the late, but that said, even though it's driven by secular sectors, that provides the income and the wherewithal for the consumers to keep spending, and that's the main engine of growth.
So, Kathy, kind of given a relative strong economy background, where does this Fed go here? When we get December 18th, we'll get a sense of kind of what they're thinking, and then where do they go in 2025? What's your outlook for the Fed?
Yeah, it's not a clear outlook right now because there's so much uncertainty surrounding policy, right? Both on the trade front, tariffs, fiscal policy, immigration. But we think, I think in terms of just the very near term, we do think they cut rates 25 basis points in December. And then next year, we still see rate cuts, but at a slower pace. We look for about 75 basis points next year. But again, lots of caveats. We don't know, what's going to be unveiled. And but we're thinking overall, that we get this continued growth, but that inflation overall, aside from maybe some impact from tariffs, still continues on a disinflationary path.
We have productivity today, Kathleen Bostjancic. We've got small business optimism. That's out with a pretty good statistic. We have non-farm productivity at 8:30. Does productivity measure the performance of our listeners and our viewers? Or is it just like a business statistic that says a given company like Nationwide is more productive?
Well, it measures all of that. I mean, it measures how productive firms are, but also workers. And that's really, I'm glad you brought that up because that's really been another wonderful and I think somewhat surprising driver of economic growth. We've all been talking about AI and the potential of boosting productivity, but most of us think of that hasn't really played out yet, right? That's a medium to long-term picture. But we have seen this productivity growth over the last several quarters, really last year has been very strong. So even though employment growth has been slowing, GDP growth hasn't. So what's the differential? The differential is productivity growth. So that's good news for everybody.
Talk to us about this K-shaped economy out there, Kathy. I mean, how problematic is that overall? I mean, how does that kind of factor into your economic model?
Yeah, that's the negative part of the economy right now is this K-shaped economy, particularly on how it impacts consumers. And it's real when you dissect the data, whether it's consumer spending, income, sentiment, confidence data, you see it very clearly. That if you're in the lower middle income, lower income households, you're struggling right now. Price levels are high. Interest rates are still high, and wage growth is kind of for those cohorts have kind of leveled out. It picked up a lot during the pandemic. Upper income households, upper middle income households, very different story. Not only are they benefiting from still strong wage growth and low unemployment, but they also are the asset holders. And as you talk about all day long, the equity market up as strongly as it is, and home prices up 50%, right, since the pandemic. There's a powerful wealth effect, and that helps propel spending.
Kathy, thank you so much. To get us started with a brief on the American economy with Nationwide, Kathleen Bostjancic, their chief economist. Futures up 3, red and green on the screen. The VIX 14.17. The Sweeney yield.
Yep.
What do you think? 3.99%? Could we get there?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. Rates
4.15.
It's funny. You've kind of got rates higher for
Sort
longer.
of.
But I've got a Fed cutting rates, so I'm not sure how that whole interest rate thing works. I'll have to ask some smart people today.
In real deflation in China, I mean, it's off the radar, but there it was at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m.
Yep.
China's got some serious lower rate deflationary problems. Right now, with our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. New York prosecutors have charged a man with murder in the fatal shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Luigi Mangione is currently being held without bail in Pennsylvania after he was arrested and arraigned on gun, forgery, and other charges. Altoona Deputy Police Chief Derek Swope says one of the officers called to a McDonald's recognized the suspect after they asked him to pull his mask down.
He had asked the suspect if he had been in New York City recently, and that really invoked a physical reaction from the suspect. He became visibly nervous, kind of shaking at that question.
New York Mayor Eric Adams.
You just did a great job, heads up policing. You took a dangerous person off the street. We thank you so much.
Mangione is expected to be extradited to New York eventually. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised defiantly to refute the corruption allegations against him as he began testifying in his long-running trial. He is the first sitting Israeli leader to take the stand as a criminal defendant at the same time as he faces an international arrest warrant for war crimes accusations. In his opening testimony today in a packed Tel Aviv courtroom, Netanyahu portrayed himself as a dedicated leader and a defender of Israel's interests, swatting away the charges against him as a drop in the sea compared to the challenges he has faced protecting his country. In Southern California, a wildfire broke out late last night in Malibu and was spreading rapidly on hillsides a few miles from Pepperdine University. This young man lives there.
Pretty crazy. It's like my first time seeing it, like a big fire like this up close. And yeah, I'm just hoping that my grandparents' house is good.
Some mandatory evacuations have been ordered in the area. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
That was great. Where did you talk to that gentleman from Pepperdine for sure?
What a nice young man. He's worried about his grandma and grandpa's house and he's never seen this before. So, it's...
Here's the headline from KTLA. Wildfire explodes near Pepperdine University. Evacuations ordered. That's harsh.
That is. I mean, that part of the world, it just seems like every single year around that area, they have to deal with this. So it doesn't matter how much rain they get during the wintertime, it's just always an issue.
By the way, without that bow tie, you got that Tom Selleck look.
Oh, there you go.
I wish I had the Tom Selleck checkbook. I know, I'm getting emails all over. I mean, I'm sorry, folks. I mean, once a year, I forget the bow tie and all that. I survived. Did you survive your birthday?
Absolutely, yeah, all good.
Did your children get your age wrong and think you're a year older than you really are?
1 out of 4.
1 out of 4.
Recognized my birthday. The other 3 knucklehead boys had no clue.
Oh, it was the girl that called.
Yes, my daughter called. She's good.
Right.
And she even called her brothers, her knucklehead brothers, and they still did not follow up. So that's kind of how we roll.
The middle child's out in Los Angeles. I get a phone call at 10 p.m. Did I wake you? That's the way it is. That's the way we roll here. We roll on YouTube. And, can we do a good morning?
Sure.
We got a lovely note from 160 miles north of Helsinki.
Wow.
Atari, Finland. To the gentleman in Atari with your beautiful handwritten note about listening to Lisa Mateo. The sun never comes up there.
No.
Even in July, the sun's not up there. Good morning, all listening in Scandinavia. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out at YouTube. We are absolutely shocked at how international it is. And we say good morning, north of Finland. From New York City right now, futures red and green on the screen. Stay with us on your commute. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today. All right, looks like investors in this wait-and-see approach is ahead of more inflation data. Wednesday, consumer price index. We have initial jobless claims, PPI on Thursday. Meantime, U.S. small business optimism. That surge in November, 3-year high. That was due to hopes of favorable economic policies under Donald Trump's presidency. Right now, NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 29 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 33. S&P futures, little changed, up about 3. The 2-year yield, 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, and that's up 3 basis points. To commodities, Brent crude lower, down 0.3% at $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,676 an ounce, and the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. Few companies making news. We'll start with Boeing. Reuters reporting that it's restarted production of the 737 MAX on Friday, and that came a month after that strike shut down manufacturing. Its shares are up more than 0.5%. And Sony shares hit a record closing high in Tokyo, up more than 4%. That was thanks to hopes for its game segment, also its entertainment businesses. And shares of construction equipment company Ashtead, it's down more than 13% in London, lowered its financial guidance, also said it planned to move its primary listing to New York. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate that. Tomorrow, 10:30 in the Sweeney Steel Hour, David Guerra in conversation with Janet Yellen.
Oh, very good.
Not a modest interview.
Yep.
I saw some of the debt and deficit numbers here. And I hope they talk fiscal policy a little bit. But that'll be important.
Okay,
David Guerra with I still call her Chair Yellen.
Okay.
Secretary of Treasury.
Yeah.
Janet
She's
Yellen
done it
as
all.
well. Darkening the door right now, and this is well timed. We've got some great equity coverage. I said to the interns, I said, I need more equity coverage. Peter Scheer joins us right now, but we got to digress here. He is with Academy and Academy Securities, as head of macro strategy, and their whole angle, their distinction, if you will, is a real military background. Peter Scheer, what do your board of directors say about the absolute Putin shock in the Mediterranean? Is it just understood that there's going to be a migration to the new Syria, Libya?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I think it changes a lot on the world stage. So I think on the good side is you see both Iran and Russia looking weak. So as Trump talks about ending wars or kind of peace, I think both those countries are now back on their heels. They've been exposed, weak. Again, Iran has been kind of exposed time and again. So I think that's good news. On the other side of the coin is clearly, how do you make sure that something bad doesn't arise out of whatever the Assad mess was? It was messy, right, but it did not seem to, proliferate, terrorism. So I think that's the risk. I think you're going to see a lot of activity, both from Israel and ourselves, trying to ensure that nothing bad emerges out of, the mess in Syria. And the one thing I think that's interesting, I think much of the Middle East will support that effort. I think really Iran and these proxies have become the enemy of the progress most of the Middle East is trying to make. So I think there's actually going to be a lot of support there.
Do you divorce that good conversation from the confidence to invest in capitalism and in these buoyant American markets?
Yeah, it's we're sitting there, and I was just in London last week, and the big question there is, why do people keep buying U.S. stocks at these high multiples and European stocks?
Because we're popping 5% nominal GDP. End of discussion.
Yeah, so I think things are good here, but I do think we are a little bit over our skis again. It's very hard to get a big sell-off. I think in December, seasonality tends to be good, but I do see a lot of froth building up in the market. I think people have also become overly complacent on Trump. I think they forget that he likes chaos, and now that everyone's decided, these are all just negotiating ploys with China, we're set up for a little bit of failure as we see real friction emerge.
How much pullback would you expect to see if and when we do get this pullback, which we haven't seen for such a long time?
Again, I think it's going to be like what we've been getting. Maybe we get these 3 to 5% very rapid pullbacks. Maybe this one can be 5 to 10%. Problem is, it's not going to be extended, I feel like. The market structure just leads itself to these kind of steady grinds, then these big declines. The one thing I would say, given all the hype, the S&P 500 is up less than 1% in the past 30 days. So we get these grinds higher that sound exciting, and then these steep declines. I think we're setting up for another steep decline.
So you're over in London last week. I mean, the UK market, the European markets, they are certainly cheaper than the US market for a variety of reasons, one of which is they don't have a big tech exposure. What do you find? Do you find any value over there, any opportunities over there?
You know, as a contrarian, I would love to say yes, but it feels like it's a mess. And I think the one thing Europe's really struggling with dealing with is over the last 10 years, whether it was Brexit or the Greek debt crisis, Germany's been this juggernaut, right? This economic powerhouse. Germany is really struggling both economically and I think even politically. So I think Europe's just a mess, and there's this risk of more fracturing. And I think even with the U.S. and ourselves, right, we are going to go butt heads with China. Europe's in no position to do that.
Well, you guys are talking. I'm on the Bloomberg Professional Service.
There you go.
Looking at 4 standard deviations. We're up, of course, about +2 standard deviations. We've been riding the rail since the beginning of 2024. Higher. A 2 standard deviation pullback is down 13.4%. That's how extended we are.
I know.
Forget about 10% correction.
No, exactly. Forget about 10%. All right. So, given we're going to get some inflation data this week here in the United States, Peter, CPI tomorrow, PPI Thursday. How do you think the Fed's going to look inflation? Do they feel like they've got inflation under the control, or do they feel like, boy, this last 100 basis points of inflation is tough to get down?
I think they're a little bit worried about, how hard it is to get down. I think there's going to be some inflation pressure coming into the new year. There are allegations or, stories that companies are trying to buy goods in case the tariffs do come in.
Okay.
I think you're going to see a lot of domestic production. You're going to see a lot of policy. So I think inflation is going to be steady. So I think we get this 25. And it's nice for the Fed, right? They'll have cut 100 bips. 100 is a nice round number. Then I think they take it easy because they really want to watch the data. And the jobs data, although the unemployment rate creeped higher, that was all because the household survey was a disaster, but the establishment survey was great.
Okay, so, we're now a month removed from the election. We kind of know what we're going to get in the White House. We kind of know what we're going to get in Congress. Did that change the way you think about these markets or opportunities or risks? And
I think we all have to learn how to, play the markets with Trump again. And 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, it was kind of easy for me because I think everyone was so negative on Trump and tariffs and yields were going to the moon. Okay, they got over their skis. Now everyone's, I think, too complacent. I think the one thing he is very certain of, he wants to be fully staffed and he wants to be staffed with people who will do his bidding. So he's trying to get that accomplished. I think he's going to be very tough, and I think China is going to surprise people how tough he is. One of our generals worked with him when he was doing the last round of negotiations with China. And basically, China tricked him a little bit. They said they were going to buy a bunch of our ag products. They never came through and bought those.
I remember that, yeah.
So I think he is going to be very aware of that, and he's going to drive a hard bargain.
Quickly, just, Stolfus is out at OPCO, the 7,100 target. Does Shear have a SPX target?
I try not to think a year ahead. I barely can make it through the next few weeks or months. I think it could go higher again, but I do think there's this potential for pullback. And I think as it's been now for a while, is where do we stand on AI, the data center build-outs? And part of me is concerned, while this is going to be the future of the economy and the future of the country, does it look like fiber, where fiber was also going to be the future, and we overbuilt so much fiber too quickly that all those companies had trouble?
5G?
Oh, yeah.
5G. I still don't know what 5G is.
How about big data? What happened to big data? I think big data is now AI. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's all becoming the same.
The Academy Securities Nano Fund. That really worked out. Peter Shear, thank you so much. With Academy Securities there with a touch of the geopolitics folded in. We're really committed to informing you on surveillance. We're not going to do it a lot, but there are seismic, there's no other word, seismic changes going on in the Mediterranean, and we will inform you there with good conversations over the next number of days. Again, on YouTube, I just can't say enough about it. Tell friends, family, Romans, whatever. We'll take anybody. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on YouTube, and you can not only get us, you get everything involved with Bloomberg Podcasts, including Joe Weisenthal and Tracy Ellaway out at Odd Lots. And of course, on your morning commute across this nation, good morning on Sirius XM, Channel 121, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. On the corridor, 99.1 FM Washington, 92.9 FM from Mount Washington to Block Island, and on Bloomberg 1130 AM, the home of New York Met 1 Soto.
The Red Sox were there, I understand.
Red Sox were there.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we've got red and green on the screen. Traders are waiting that key inflation data from the U.S. as well as European Central Bank policy decision later this week. The ECB expected to cut its policy rate for a fourth time this year on Thursday. NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 42 points. We have Dow futures down 33 points. S&P futures little changed, up about 4. The 2-year yield 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's up 2 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. To earnings we go. AutoZone reported comparable sales for the first quarter, missed estimates, but here's the thing: its CEO said the company is, quote, well positioned for growth. Its shares are up about 0.5%. Vail Resorts, love the ticker MTN Mountain, posted a smaller quarterly loss than expected, boosting shares. Shares are up about 3%. And Taiwan Semiconductor revenue jumped 34% to $8.5 billion in November. That was on sustained AI demand. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. Last time she was in, I learned a lot, plain and simple. Monica Guerra joins us, Executive Director, Head of U.S. Policy at Morgan Stanley Wealth. And there's like 18 things to talk about here, but I'm sorry, I got to rip up the script. Greg Villiers over at AGF Toronto comes out today with a blistering summary of what we all know, but I guess we're ignoring. $2 trillion budget deficit. How will that impinge on policy? What is the constraint of a budget deficit that is up $242 billion more than in the same period last year? What's the constraint?
It means that they're going to have to actually deal with it. And I think what's interesting about this incoming administration and Congress is that there's a lot of commitment to actually getting a budget through. We've been living on continuing resolutions over the past year or longer. And essentially with the reconsideration of taxes, as well as tariff revenues, et cetera, they're going to have to actually come up with a full budget package that is going to have to take the deficit into consideration. So the constraint is, how much do we add to the deficit, and how do we make up for those losses?
Do you see any ability to go, forget about cutting deficits and all the, the people that want to do that. Everybody says not going to happen. Can we flatline?
Can we flatline? No, I would say if you're thinking about, I'm thinking about what flatline means, right? If we're thinking about faith in U.S. Treasuries and the global marketplace, I don't think we're at a critical tipping point yet. They have to consider the impacts of deportation and immigration policies, as well as how tariffs could impact inflation, and then package that in with tax cuts and how they're going to negotiate spending cuts as well, and then that's going to get you to a place of, are we in the red or the black? And either any way you shake it, we're going to add. It's just how much. And even if you're looking at, say, $1 trillion deficit over addition over 10 years, that would be on the bright side. And it's about essentially making sure productivity is strong, as well as management of inflation, and that's going to keep global investors, right, still turning to the dollar, still turning to U.S. Treasuries. So yes, taxes are important, deficits are important, but it's about sort of the management in relationship to productivity and inflation. And I think that those three prongs sometimes get missed in the soup of the discussion.
You're head of U.S. policy at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. What's the first 100 days going to look like of this new administration? I mean, he's going to have the House, the Senate, yes, very narrow majorities, but still majorities. What can this administration get done in the first 100 days, do you think?
If you're looking at the executive branch, there's a lot that they can do, right? Immigration is day one. That's going to be a real change. We have to think about how much that looks like. If you're thinking annually, about 300,000 people get deported from the U.S. already. Okay. If they're looking at a 400,000 number is what they've most recently cited, that could be in addition, that could be net 100,000 more. So those are very different outcomes when we're thinking about near-term growth and growth prospects. The other thing they're going to focus on with day one is tariffs, and especially the way that we negotiate and reconsider our relationship with Mexico. So one of the things I've heard from DHS as it relates to immigration is that they're going to be focusing on Central Americans, not necessarily Mexicans, because we need them for mining, commodities, rare minerals, et cetera. So this is going to be a dynamic first 100 days. The Doge effect that people talked about, I think that's much later, because they're going to use those first 100 days to come up with proposals before Congress actually considers them. And then we're going to see the first writings on the wall of what those tax and budget conversations look like. So I think first 100 days is really about creating the path forward and that map that we're going to follow through 2026 and 2027.
Are we going to have a messy confirmation process for some of these appointees? And that could derail maybe some of these policy decisions?
I think they're getting ahead of it, right?
Okay.
This was the sort of the quickest we've seen in recent history of folks being put forward and then dropping out of contention for secretary positions. This is sort of record rates of turnover before the administration even gets into office. The critical thing here is that Trump is putting forth his personal picks and then responding to the limits that are being presented to him in Congress. So Senator John Thune, as majority leader, is incredibly important in the Senate. And it's essentially creating this barrier, right, to some of the more outlier appointees. And he's saying if you don't get, if they don't necessarily meet basic standard of background, education, understanding, we're not going to confirm them. And the fact that he was actually voted on, right, by GOP members, right, to become the Senate Majority Leader, that means that folks are interested in maintaining a certain amount of independence and legislative authority in the Senate.
In the time we've got left, I've got to go to your earned experience on the great city of New York. We've just had a huge crime that's the focus worldwide, but far more of that is just running the city into 2025. When you look at the concerns of our fiscal policy here, what's at the top of the list for Monica Guerra?
If we're thinking about fiscal policy, the first thing that comes to mind is, management of the broader agencies. When you're talking about, the most recent crime, I think that that's top of mind for a lot of folks of making sure that the city is safe. Now, from a fiscal perspective, top news headline, right, is congestion pricing, right? Yep. And are they going to be able to bring in enough revenue? Are they going to be able to actually implement it on Jan 5? So we're going to be watching
that. What do you think?
I think if they can do it, right?
But to me the distinction here is they're modeling off Stockholm and London. Our taxi cabs are third world compared to London. Isn't there like a bargain here of alternative transportation that we're supposed to have, like Stockholm and like London, as we implement this good congestion tax?
So that's the thing, is that you need to, for the way we're thinking about the MTA and the way the state is focusing on is that we need to get the congestion tax first, get those revenues in, and then they can secure that against debt that can essentially build out and help the MTA.
Brilliantly said. With all your experience, is that doable?
I think it is. I do think it's doable. I think that I don't know the ins and outs of the implementation for taxis. Maybe what they're going to do is have everybody download an app. I don't know what that looks like. That's the easiest thing I can think of. I don't want to speak on behalf of of the city and the state for that.
I understand.
But I do think that there are ways to get there. And if you bring in 500 mil as the latest, guesstimate of what they could bring in, that is worthwhile considering the losses that the MTA has experienced.
Where are we on subway? I mean, to me, I'm a subway rider every single day for 45 years. I think it's the greatest mode of transportation in the world. I think I'm in a minority there. How is the MTA these days, just broadly defined?
Broadly defined, I think they're still struggling with some of those, COVID losses.
Yep.
And they're going to be, looking to essentially patch that revenue. They were already in a budget imbalance prior to COVID. It just made it worse. And so something like congestion pricing might be necessary to essentially keep service at a level that's tenable and then go beyond. So if they're able to actually use that revenue to secure billions in debt, then you have a robust capital plan. But they have to find that revenue, and I think that could come from congestion pricing.
Thank you for that audible. Monica Guerra is with Morgan Stanley on U.S. policy. We should mention also that she held the position of Director of Capital Budget and Economic Development for the City of New York, among other duties. Just love having Monica Guerra on. Good morning. Bloomberg 1130 in New York. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. New York prosecutors have filed murder charges against the suspect in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Luigi Mangione is currently being held without bail after apparently being spotted in Altoona, Pennsylvania. New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch.
Officers recovered a handwritten document that speaks to both his motivation and mindset.
Meanwhile, a private funeral was held for Thompson Monday. A gang leader who controls a key port in Haiti's capital is accused of massacring older people and religious leaders in his community to avenge his son's death. Human rights organizations say the true number of dead isn't clear, but Haiti's government on Monday acknowledged the massacre and said over 100 people were killed. Spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Stéphane Dujarric.
The Secretary General strongly condemns the continued gang violence and the loss of life in Haiti, where an armed gang is reported to have killed at least 184 people, including 127 elderly men and women between the 6th and the 8th of December.
The UN's Dujarric says Guterres reiterated his call for financial and logistical support to help the Haitian National Police Department to address gang violence. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is testifying in court on a corruption trial today. Netanyahu is charged with bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Doctors say Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is now stable, talking normally, eating, and should be under observation for the next few days. Lula is in intensive care at a hospital in Sao Paulo after undergoing emergency brain surgery for a hemorrhage. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
I'm going to even watch. Can we get out front, Paul, of Lions, Bills, 4:25 p.m.?
Wow.
The 15th of December?
That is going to be,
That's like a real game.
That is a
I mean, Michael
game.
Barr, the Lions do not have an easy schedule.
Bet the over on that game. That's going to be a high-scoring game. And you're right. There is no easy schedule. And again, I said this before. If it weren't for the Lions, we'd be talking about the Minnesota Vikings because they're only one game behind. That division is tight. Even Green Bay, I know that the Lions beat them, but they're still in play. You know, the only team in that division, Chicago, well, that's another story.
So December 30th is marriage trauma at the Barr household.
Oh, no.
It's Lions 49ers.
Yeah, just separate, go to your separate
It
corners.
really determines the New Year's Eve celebration, doesn't it, Michael Barr?
That's a bologna sandwich night, man. That's going to happen there.
The Lions.
I can't. Have you made, I'm afraid to ask. Have you made your New Year's Eve plans, Paul? We all live vicariously through your schedule.
No, I don't think so. Not as of that I'm aware of, so I'll put it that way. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out.
See my Advent calendar. I open up the little window.
Yep.
Duke basketball.
Sure.
was there, and he had been
Yeah,
killed.
they
Opened
beat
up
Louisville.
another window. The Rock
Yep.
was there.
Exactly. Lots
We'll see
coming
what
up.
I got to open up the surveillance calendar here and the advent calendar here and see what we got coming up. We got red and green on the screen is what we got. Important data, productivity today. I know it's like a bigger picture thing, but nevertheless, what a statement on this moment of American exceptionalism. And then your CPI tomorrow, Paul. I'm all
CPI is
twisted
tomorrow,
around.
8:30, Tom. So we'll be right on top of it tomorrow here. And then on Thursday, PPI, 8:30.
just
so
as good.
I'm all over that.
Well, that for you as well. And we see it in the 10-year real yield right now, stasis 1.95%. On the currency market, there's some really interesting nuances. Dollar resilient, DXY, 106.34. I'm not on 105, not on 104. Some strength there. Euro, 105.30. Sterling, 127.53. And renminbi, stasis there as well. I noticed Turkish lira walks away with a tension in the Eastern Mediterranean. From New York City on your morning commute, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got little movement in futures. This is after the S&P 500 slipped from nearly overbought technical levels on Monday. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 48 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 23. S&P futures, little changed, up about 5. The 2-year yield, 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, and that's up 2 basis points. Brent crude down about 0.4%, $71 a barrel. WTI crude, $68 a barrel. We have spot gold up about 0.5% at $2,675 an ounce. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. We have the Japanese yen weaker, euro weaker, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin up about 0.2%, around 97,000. Deal-making news: Stellantis, CATL plan to invest as much as 4.1 billion pounds. They're going to build an EV factory plant in Spain. And sources say Prudential considering options, and that includes selling a minority stake in Eastspring. Now, a potential stake sale, well, that could value the company about $3 billion. And finally, Arabica coffee hit a record high in New York, growing concerns over a global supply crunch. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Have we seen it at Starbucks yet? I never go in Starbucks, so I don't know. You seen $10? You seen $10 orders from the kids?
I know there's $8 lattes out there.
Because your daughter gets
it comes
those.
on my Apple Pay all the time.
Exactly. Double short mocha, $5.83. It's like a shot.
A double what?
Double short mocha. That's how you roll.
mocha?
And here's my tipping
You seen
strategy.
in public ordering that?
Oh, yeah. Here's my tipping
Double
strategy
short
for all these
mocha.
things. If you stand, I don't tip. If I sit, I tip.
Oh, this is a new
is that
strategy.
okay?
Isn't that?
Okay.
I think that is a good way to go.
Well, they work hard to make that double short latte loco,
and
whatever
that's
it
reflected
is.
in the price. I don't know.
I'm getting comments on my new glasses. What do you think?
Very nice.
I lost the others in Rome. They're there.
It
Somebody's-
happens. It
With the bow
happens.
tie.
Somebody from the Vatican's walking around with them on. Red and green on the screen of VIX 14.12. It's that time.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
And we thank all of you for listening across the nation on YouTube, on America, and worldwide. The daily look at the front pages. It is the Lisa Mateo Hour. It's brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. There are no ticket charges. There are no conflicts of your interests at ibkr.com/RIA. Lisa, what do you got?
All right, we got to go to Juan Soto and the Mets, right? Thank you to Ari for pointing this article out. Big shout out there. So yes, the Mets offered the most money for Juan Soto, right? Outbidding the Yankees by about $5 million. But
Really?
it could have been more
$5
than
million
that.
was the difference?
No, it could have been more than that. See, it could be the perk of a suite for his family. That could have been the game changer. Because opposed to saying that Mets over Steve Cohen, he gave that green light for Soto and his family to get Citi Field for his family. That part of the deal. The suite, okay, that's what he wanted. He wanted the suite. The Yankees wouldn't give it to him.
You mean like above third
yes,
base?
like 16 tickets.
This
the
is
suite.
In the railing, and they serve food.
The fancy. There's anywhere at Citi Field from about 3,200 to about 13,000. It'll cost
It's right
depending
next
on the
to
game.
Scott Haven's suite. He runs the place for Steve.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the Yankees don't give suites to their players. Derek Jeter,
Yeah,
Aaron Judge.
they pay for theirs.
They pay for it. Now, discounted rates, but
Sure.
they pay for it, so they didn't want to create this precedent, I guess. So
Yeah, they were willing to do the discounted rate, but you know
Okay.
what? He said no.
Very cool.
I want it as part of my deal.
Yes,
So
exactly. All
This
The only
is the
question
thing.
to me is it towards home plate from Scott Haven's suet, or is it out farther down third baseline?
Yeah, that's a good
That's a
question.
good
We'll see.
question. I don't know exactly where it is, but any kind of suite is nice if you
Okay,
ask
next.
me. But it is. It's pretty pricey. But the Yankees, 8,000 to 20,000. That's how
Of
much
course,
their
and
suites
their
go
suites
for.
are all sold. I'm not
God.
sure about the Mets, quite frankly.
Yes, maybe now they will. There
Yeah.
you go.
Yes, good point.
Okay, this is from the Wall Street Journal. Two most dreaded words when you get a text is when someone texts you, "Call me."
Oh boy.
Does that annoy you? Like,
Or
you don't know the urgency. You don't
Right.
know how important it is. So that's to say that it's all over social media now, the whole "call me" thing. I get it because my son texts me, "Call me," and I'm going on my phone. I'm like, something's wrong, and he wants to know where the peanut butter is. You know, so it's like it doesn't work. So they're saying you need to change up the text. Okay, you say, "Please call me, no rush." Okay?
Oh,
That's what
I
you
see.
do.
Okay. All right.
Please call me when you can. Okay,
It's
not
amazing.
Because nobody
important.
calls anymore. Everybody
No,
just texts.
it takes a few extra taps, people of the
Yeah.
thumbs. Come on, just put the
It's-
extra wording.
It's amazing how the behavior's changed. I mean, it's absolutely. I mean,
Well, remember back in the day, when would you call your parents? Sunday. Sunday was always a time, like
No,
you're at
true,
school,
true. Yes.
you would call.
In college, I would call on Sundays.
And
Yeah,
they had
to
rates,
send money.
even lower rates, like at nighttime on a Sunday night to call. Anyway, so I even now on Sundays I try to reach out to the kids across the globe.
Oh, you do?
But it doesn't.
Good, even though they didn't call you for your birthday.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Except your daughter.
I'm
yeah.
eyeballing Apple here, up 26% this year. I mean, I don't know what percentage of our phones are Apple, but our behavior's really changed.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's really, really strange.
Yeah. A lot of people texting. They also say that the younger people are complaining because they're getting those "call me" texts from their parents who don't realize the text etiquette. And they're saying, "Mom, you can't just text 'call me.' Like, you have to tell
I
me
can do whatever
what."
I want to do.
There you go. There you go.
I'm in charge.
Oh, God.
You work for me.
This is like we're Dr.
work
Phil
for
with
me.
Lisa.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
trauma in the Mateo household.
Stirring
Next.
up some controversy. Okay, global ad sales. They're actually set to top $1 trillion
Wow.
in 2024. thanks to online advertising. Sites like Alphabet's Google, Meta Platforms, Amazon. This is a report from Buyer Group, Group M.
Yep,
So
they're the
Google,
best.
Meta, Amazon share. Total global ad revenue now at 41%. But there's a reason for the boost in sales. And it's not because of political advertising. That wasn't the whole thing behind the boost. It's because of like the Paris Olympics. That was a big boost for it. Those ad-supported tiers where people are paying more to see the ads. That's another thing because they want to save a few bucks, so they'll pay more to have to see the ads. And also you have streaming services, Netflix, Comcast, Peacock. They're also good news because you had Comcast who showed the Olympics on broadcast TV, but also cable, and then also on Peacock as well. So global ad sales.
Yep,
Topping
1 trillion. And
with a
again, the
T.
number that you mentioned, Lisa, the digital players, Google, Meta, Amazon, digital advertising,
So
their
where
total
are we,
share of
where
advertising
are we
is
in
41%.
5 years? Why should this trend stop?
Yeah, I don't think it will stop because actually, if you're an advertiser, it's never been better to advertise now because you have really good solutions for you. It's instead of buying an ad on a broadcast network, which you have no idea who you're reaching, if it's your demo or not. Now with these digital advertising platforms, Google, Meta, Amazon, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, you have much better information about who your audience is. And you
People
can
are
target it
clicking
better.
on it.
It's more valuable to the advertisers, and they're allocating more and more money. So it's, and we saw yesterday, Tom, while you were out at yesterday, Omnicom, big ad agency, buying Interpublic Group.
Two dinosaurs mating?
Yep, exactly right.
If I go and I try to order something and I've got to go because I got to see who Steve Cohen's buying next, and about 2 hours later I get an email from the people, did you forget something?
Yep.
That's sort of like weird.
It is.
Do you have anything else in 50 seconds?
Yes, in 50 seconds. This is for the Gen Zers. I know you have in your household, okay? Gen Z, 12 to 27, that's the age.
Oh, is that the age?
Yes, that's the
12
age.
to 27.
They're becoming Gen G, which is for giving. They're very giving. That's what this I knew this would spark you. They're very giving. Apparently, this is in the Financial Times. Here's the reason why. Because they're going to be the recipients of what financial advisors call the Great Wealth Transfer. Okay, that's when the retiring boomers pass down the trillions of dollars to their assets over the next 20 years.
And here's a great lead sentence in this Financial Times article by Marianne Willingham. Generation Z has been raised on a cocktail of climate panic, internet activism, and viral celebrity.
And that's why they want to give back.
That's a great lead.
Can we just get one of them to read a book cover to cover?
Yeah.
They don't read?
No.
But they're giving.
They're giving.
Yes.
We're giving too. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. The newspapers this morning. So I go to a concert in like 1977. I could shave like once a week. And there's an opening act that pretty much nobody knows. And they play this song, and the arena came to a complete, I've never seen it, Paul. The place stopped for Fleetwood Mac, opened at the time for Loggins and Messina. Stay with us on YouTube across the nation as well.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What do you say to people scared stiff in cash?
We've got an administration, presumably, that will be pro-business, lower taxes.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Interesting Tuesday before the CPI report. I guess we get that tomorrow, but lots going on in equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. We have a focus on the end of the year, this great bull market. Cameron Dawson will join us here in a moment to parse forward earnings, free cash flow into further everything's going to have a 50 multiple.
I know.
That's where we are.
No problem.
Dominion Electric, 50 multiple. That's where we're going as well. We say good morning. And we say good morning and thank you, Cohn Resnick. Bloomberg Surveillance is brought to you by Cohn Resnick. Advisory Assurance Tax is your business future ready. Talk to Cohn Resnick's digital advisory team about strategies and platforms to drive competitive advantage. Before we get to Lisa to race to Cam Dawson, we got Kevin Gordon coming up from Schwab, who went to Pepperdine.
I know.
And this fire,
Serious.
It's serious. I mean, like Topanga Canyon.
Yep.
We just played Fleetwood Mac. I mean, Mick Fleetwood's out there going, what are we doing? Topanga Canyon's closed down here at 5 a.m.
I mean, our good friends in California, it seems like every year they have to deal with this at some point around the state here. So hopefully they can get that stuff under control here, Tom.
We'll have to see. We'll have more on that. Kevin Gordon, our meteorologist for today, will join us later. Also on the equity markets as well. Let's get right to it. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
We got futures pretty much treading water. It looks like traders looking to that key inflation data this week, also continuing to monitor the upsurge in geopolitical risk in the Middle East as well. We'll start with NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 45 points. Dow futures down 0.1%, 52 points. S&P futures little changed, up about 5. The 2-year yield 4.15%. That's up 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.24%, and that's up 4 basis points. The Stocks Europe 600 index, well, that snapped an 8-day streak of gains after China's top leadership. They promised looser policy in 2025. So right now, that is down about 0.1%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, taking a look there, it is little changed. We have shares of Oracle lower, but they were down about 8%, now down about 5%. Quarterly revenue in line with estimates, but investors, well, they wanted a little bit more from the company's cloud business. Then you have shares of Google parent Alphabet up 3%. The company announced a breakthrough in quantum computing through its new Willow quantum chip. And finally, shares of NVIDIA extending their losses just a bit after news that China probing the company over alleged anti-monopoly violations. That was yesterday. It's still down about 0.2%. Yesterday, that decline in shares helped push the S&P 500 lower. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thank you so much, Lisa. This great bull market, whether you are in it, sort of kind of like in it, or whether those of the triple leveraged all cash fund are not in it, it is what it is, a great bull market. We're dedicated to giving you not pontification, not crystal ball gazing, but just clear conversation from people who have the courage to participate in the equity markets and not time it. Cam Dawson joins us, New Edge Wealth Management. Every time that's like a ballet lesson.
Yeah.
My ankles hurt after talking to Cam Dawson.
Exactly.
Cam, I'm looking at this market, and I got to re-justify. The zeitgeist this morning is year 3, come on. Have we ever had a double-digit third year?
It has happened. It happened in the 90s, but of course we know what happened after that double-digit third years. You had effectively the blow-off top of 99 into early 2000, and then it took 14 years for the NASDAQ to make a new high. So one of the scenarios that we are considering for 2025 is that we do go back into bubble territory, that we do see this market continue to rally, trade at even more extreme valuations, positioning get even more stretched.
Keep up?
Well, earnings are expected to grow 13% next year. There's a lot of margin. Well, and that's up from just 1-2% growth this year. So there is an expectation of a rebound, but that embeds a lot of margin expansion. That's the one area we would draw a question mark if that's really achievable. But that 13% upside in growth is coming as you're already trading at 22.5. So our base case for next year is that you effectively get the best return you can possibly get is the earnings growth that you deliver and not further multiple expansion.
SPX just year to date up 26-27%. SPW, the equal weighted index, only up about 16% or so. So is there an opportunity to broaden out maybe some of this performance? Do I look for some valuation in the market outside of maybe some of the big tech names that have driven growth in 2024?
Yeah, we're calling it the elusive quest for broadening out.
Oh, okay.
And there's been this hope.
That was such a good movie.
There's been this hope that you would see broader participation in the market, and certainly a narrative that has gone along with it. But quite interestingly, the equal weight S&P 500 just hit a 4-month relative low versus SPX.
Really? Okay, I didn't know
And the Mag 7 just hit a new relative high versus XBX. So in reality, this remains a very narrow market.
And that's not, I mean, from what I remember, that's not a healthy technical support for the market. So does that bring concern into the market?
Well, it doesn't necessarily pretend immediate downside. We have certainly seen this market go through peak points of narrowing. We got to that peak point in June, early July of this year, and we know what happened. We had a pullback in tech and growth. We had that increase in volatility. So if it continues, that certainly would be a concern. But you can see narrow leadership in the market persist, which has been the message over the last 2 years.
You're too young to remember this, but we used to have 3-year calls. And down at the bottom, Sanford Bernstein was great at this. They'd have sensitivity analysis, one big what if going out 36 months. Now we're all trying to get to March 31, 2005. How long out is your vision of 13% earnings growth? Don't give me 1 year, right?
Yeah, what's interesting is that in consensus, that earnings growth is expected to continue into 2026 at 12% growth.
Says who?
Says consensus, but the good thing to remember is that consensus is not necessarily a crystal ball and doesn't mean it's going to come true. There's no better example of this than consensus estimates for small caps. They've been cut by 30% this year over the course of the year as small cap earnings continue to disappoint. And so when we look into next year, small cap earnings are expected to grow 44% next year. The highest bar you can find in this market, but we don't know if that necessarily deserves the benefit of the doubt because of this revision cycle lower that has persisted.
So are there sectors of the market that screen well for you guys these days?
We prefer not to look at things just in the buckets of sectors because what can happen is that you then ignore good opportunities that are in necessarily not the greatest sectors on a relative basis. So we're sticking with our quality call. Over the last couple of months, you've seen a massive junk rally. ARK is up 36% in the last month. We don't think that that warrants chasing. Certainly in the near term, it is a trade. But as far as an investment, we think people chasing into those junky parts of the market is why quality works over the long run.
That's techie. Do you chase Wal-Mart? I mean, forget about ARK and what they're doing with tech day to day, hour to hour. What do you do with something like Wal-Mart, which is giving me single-digit revenue growth, decent margins, and it's popping a 30 multiple?
I think that is the biggest high bar as we go into 2025, is that it's not just Walmart, it seems like Costco, it seems like even Apple. Apple is trading at its highest valuation since the peak of the pandemic, and this is on earnings growth that are 7 to 8%.
Okay, so what's the why there? Just money trying to find a warm spot?
I think it's just simple supply and demand. You have still a huge demand for stocks, but Walmart has a huge cash balance. Apple has a huge cash balance. It's buying back its own shares, which effectively means that you have shrinking supply, increasing demand, price goes up.
I just got an email in. People know that like you were like legit ballet and all that. When should you start ballet?
As early as possible.
Really?
Yeah, get the turnout, get the flexibility, get the discipline, and just play lots of ballet music.
Like 7 or 4 or
4.
4 years old?
Yeah.
You missed it, Tom. Sorry.
No, my sisters went, and it was a train wreck. I mean, how do you get a kid started in ballet where they love it?
Well, they have to love glitter and tutus and the music and the discipline
like
of
you
it.
take them to the Tchaikovsky, Christmas time. You're forced to go.
The Nutcracker.
The Nutcracker.
Yeah, that one.
You go to the Nutcracker and say, you can do this?
Yeah, you get that grease paint under your eyes. Everything is beautiful at the ballet, and you catch the bug.
I missed it.
Thank you for that email.
Yeah.
This is from one of the websites. Children must not be allowed to hit, kick, bite, or scratch the other guests. It's just like surveillance.
Yep, exactly.
That's how we do it. Cam Dawson, thanks so much. We got to get you back before year end. She's with New Edge here on the markets lifting. Let me give you those levels right now. 6,100 rounding up, 44,400 Dow. NASDAQ 21,500. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Luigi Mangione is facing a second-degree murder charge in New York in connection with the death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. A court docket also shows Mangione is also charged with possession of a loaded firearm, possession of a forged instrument, and criminal possession of a weapon. The forged instrument is the fake New Jersey driver's license he allegedly used to check into a hostel on the Upper West Side. Police in Altoona, Pennsylvania, arrested Mangione after he was spotted at a McDonald's. The NYPD says Mangione was in possession of a handwritten document that speaks to his motivation and mindset. At a news conference in Altoona, Pennsylvania, Governor Josh Shapiro says, in America, we do not kill people in cold blood to resolve policy differences.
In some dark corners, this killer is being hailed as a hero. Hear me on this. He is no hero. The real hero in this story is the person who called 911 at McDonald's.
Mangione will eventually be extradited to New York. Public opinion is divided after Marine veteran Daniel Penny was acquitted in the chokehold death of a homeless man on a New York subway. Some labeling Penny a hero for protecting passengers from a dangerous man making threats. Others arguing Penny held that chokehold far longer than necessary. Neely family attorney Dante Mills.
There's some people who look at this and say, oh, Jordan was houseless. He had mental issues, almost as if he deserved this to happen to him.
Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is awake and conscious after undergoing emergency brain surgery in Sao Paulo. Lula will stay in the intensive care unit for 48 hours as a precaution and is expected to return to Brasilia early next week. Finally, she was a poet, activist, author, and professor. Nikki Giovanni has died. In an announcement from a family friend, the acclaimed poet and Black arts movement icon died peacefully yesterday with her lifelong partner, Virginia Fowler, by her side. Nikki Giovanni was 81. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. I had a birthday yesterday. We kept it low-key.
Well, of course. I mean,
You know, like you did.
New York Stock
You had
Exchange.
one the other day.
Yep.
All that. I had to go over to have some decent Greek food at Loy. Thank you, Maria, for that. But I missed Kaylee Cox with Ritholtz.
Ritholtz Wealth Management.
Yeah.
Callie Cox was here.
Callie Cox. What did she say?
Courage to be in the market, Tom. I wonder where she heard that originally. Yes, absolutely. And you know the folks at Ritholtz Wealth Management, they just say steady, Eddie, long-term investment horizon, be in the market.
Their short term is 3 years.
Exactly. And so,
how many people listening to this right now? Send me in on YouTube. How many people do you think out on YouTube land do you think have short term is 3 years?
Yeah.
5%?
I don't know. But I think
10?
that's the way you have to think. That's what I'm trying to tell my kids. Just throw it into the 401k, max it out, and talk to me in 30 years.
Kelly Cox, thank you. Cam Dawson, thank you as well. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, investors kind of in this wait-and-see approach ahead of more inflation data tomorrow, consumer price index. We also have initial jobs claims, PPI on Thursday. Now, meantime, U.S. small business optimism, that surged in November to a 3-year high. NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 50 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 91 points. S&P futures little changed, up about 4. The 2-year yield 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's up 3 basis points. We have Brent crude down about 0.3%, $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. And the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. Companies making news: Boeing, Reuters reporting it's restarted production of the 737 MAX on Friday. Now that came a month after the strike shut down manufacturing there. Its shares are up nearly 2%. And Sony shares hit a record closing high in Tokyo, up more than 4%. That was driven by hopes for its games segment and also other entertainment businesses. And shares of construction equipment company Ashtead, it's down more than 13% in London, lowered its financial guidance, also said it plans to move its primary listing to New York. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate that. Bloomberg Surveillance from New York City across this nation. Good morning on your commute on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, particularly in the West Coast, where we really picked up a lot digitally. Joining us now, Kevin Gordon, Senior Investment Strategist at Charles Schwab, proud alumni of Pepperdine, toughest in the weather out there. I mean, it's just really difficult. We've been making not jokes about the fire, but a lightness about a fire, except it's not light. At this time now, 5:17 a.m. on the West Coast, I believe there's reports of the Payson Library at Pepperdine being open to protect students at Pepperdine. Have you ever witnessed, Kevin, a fire out there, like a Malibu fire along the Pacific Coast Highway?
I just can't stop staring at the images here in the studio. It brings back really stark memories of the Woolsey fire, which I lived through on campus in my undergrad, just towards the end of my undergrad. And it was, it's brutal. And you can see in the images, it completely destroyed a good chunk of Malibu. The rebuilding was pretty amazing. So you can rebuild, and Pepperdine is a safe spot to be for students. So I have full confidence in the university and how they handled Woolsey and how they're going to handle this.
It's in my memory. The lead guy from Tame Impala, the band, lost everything. Yeah, it was like right to the foundation.
It was devastating.
What's the solution when you talk? Pepperdine leads on this in science and the technology of it. Is it just they got to cut the shrubbery away more? How do we get beyond these disasters with Santa Ana winds?
I'm far from an expert on it. But I think that having the right structures in place, having the right protocols and policies in place, because one thing that became really clear during the Woolsey fire was, as much as panic as there is with everybody trying to scramble, and there's basically one road in Malibu to get in and out, and it's Pacific Coast Highway. So when that is a full-on traffic jam, and it takes me 2 hours to get to campus from my off-campus housing at the time, when normally it would take me 20 minutes, just having the right protocol and policies in place to be able to respond to it, I think is the best you can do right now. Of course, the other forces of nature that are at play, it's tough, especially with how strong the winds are.
Kevin, thank you for that. Really
thank you.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Kevin, we sit here towards the end of 2024, S&P 500 up, 25, 26, 27%, equal weighted up 16, 17%. So good job to you equity people. But now the question is, 2025, what do we do?
Yeah, so Lizanne and I just published our outlook for 25. Okay. And, broadly, from an equity market perspective, all the breadth metrics we track, everything from, participation in terms of percentage of companies that have been outperforming the index over a rolling 3 or 6 month basis, the percentage of companies that are in an uptrend, whether you want to look above their 200-day moving average, if you want to shorten it above their 50, everything bodes pretty well for the market on at least a 1 year, time horizon looking out. And it's human nature, I think, especially on Wall Street, to think in terms of what's going to happen January 1st to December 31st. But of course, more investors and regular investors have a longer time frame. So our main message has been the volatility backdrop is probably going to be different in 25. So in 24, we got used to this massive churn under the surface, but not a lot of volatility up at the index level, and that's evidenced by the max drawdown for the S&P being just 8.5% this year. We're not so sure that that continues next year. Not to say that we are at an imminent end for the bull market, but when you think about all of the policy disruption potentially coming out of Washington, if you want to dust off part of the 2018 playbook in terms of tariff policy in particular, and now you add on to that relatively aggressive immigration policy, I just think it becomes more of a volatility driver. I don't think it's necessarily fatal to the bull, but of course, if participation starts to wane and you start to get more weakness under the surface, then I think it's a little bit of a different discussion.
How many people have missed whatever portion of this bull market you want to analyze? I mean, to me, it's a lot.
Yeah, there's a good chunk, and I think the doubting of it at the beginning, especially because, and I know we've talked about this a lot before, but especially because in the first year of this bull market, there were really key cyclical parts of the market that are supposed to lead in the beginning phases of a bull, whether it's followed by a recession or not. That just didn't. I mean, the Russell 2000 is kind of the one that sticks out the most to me. It was the first time that in the first year of a bull market for the S&P 500, the Russell was actually down. So it broke through its October 2022 low, which I think gave a lot of investors pause in thinking that, okay, this is not over. Clearly, there's not a lot of conviction on the part of small caps, which is classically, more leverage to the economy. So I think there were a lot of good reasons or valid reasons to not believe it. But yeah, it did, I think, spook a lot of investors into thinking that it wasn't a durable or wasn't a sustainable bull market.
Kevin, I know at Charles Schwab, they ask you to speak to Charles Schwab clients often, all around the world here.
That's part of the job.
What are your clients asking you guys these days?
A lot of it does focus on, I would say for the majority of the year up until, call it August, it was all about debt and deficits and when was this going to be kind of this big bottom falls out all at once problem. Okay. And that's not something that just started happening in January of this year. It's been sort of an evergreen question. But a lot of it now has shifted to what is the impact of policy out of Washington going to be? What do I need to watch out for? And our message has been, and we wrote this in our Outlook too, is that it is human nature probably to think of all of this just at once and to take it in all at once and think about all of the potential, whether it's a hit to growth or a potential boost to inflation. But the sequencing is really important here. So we think that you should just sort of take a patient approach to this, look at what can be done unilaterally, which will probably be tariffs addressed first. Maybe then it moves to immigration, and then down the road, because of Congress, then you get to taxes. But so there's more of a firm deadline or start date, I should say, for when that debate starts. But we've been getting a lot more questions on what is the specific impact of some of these policies.
If we co-book you and Dan Ives of Wedbush, can you give him dressing details?
I think I should be taking the dressing details from him. He's got all the fun
got
colors.
Some color going,
I have the same three colors, black, navy, brown. That's basically all I wear.
I mean, we're getting a huge black turtleneck. Well, Paul, maybe we should.
I know.
You think I should go for the black?
I think you can do that.
It's a great look for you guys. I think we should all do it next time I'm in.
I can pull it off.
Hey, Kevin, anything screening well for you guys here as you think about next year? I think some people are just looking for like a new idea. I'm Mag 7 to death at this point.
Well, from a factor standpoint, which we've been a lot more focused on sectors, we still have rankings. So communication services and financials are our outperforms. We just upgraded comm services. Financials has been at the top for several months for us. But from a factor standpoint, we actually think that one of the things that might change in 25 is looking at more rates of change for factors rather than levels. Meaning, for most of this year, it was a pretty solid play to be in names or industries that had lots of cash on the balance sheet or strong free cash flow in general. Because of where we're at in terms of the trajectory of the economy and the potential for more volatility, we think that maybe one of the better ways to look at this for next year is where are the improvements? Where are things getting better? Better or worse, mattering more than good or bad. So that's kind of a way that you can, keep yourself in gear across sectors, not have to dive into one sector and feel like you're completely excluding another one, which is sort of the trap that a lot of investors fall into.
Is this just simply a wall of money? There's just a wall of money coming in?
Yeah, I mean, in absolute terms, in terms of money market funds, there is a wall of money out there. However, we don't necessarily think that needs to be something that powers this equity market, because the equity market's been able to do just fine, even though cash, so to speak, has been able to climb more. Plus, you compare the asset levels, there's just not as much firepower in there anymore.
Kevin, thank you. Kevin Gordon with us with Schwab. They're out with their Outlook along with everybody else, and we'll get time. Is it under 90 pages?
I think just under 90.
Just under 90.
Yeah.
But it's got pictures. So
but a lot of charts. And the cartoon is great. Our cartoonist, Carlos Gary, does a great job. So the first image is the big shoulder shrug emoji that Lizanne and I are doing.
Who knows?
Kevin, thank you so much. With Charles Schwab. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 14.14. From New York City on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, growing each and every day. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures, well, we got red and green on the screen. Traders awaiting that key inflation data from the U.S. as well as European Central Bank policy decision later this week. ECB expected to cut its policy rate for a fourth time this year. That's taking place on Thursday. NASDAQ futures now up about 0.1%, 31 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 102 points. We have S&P futures little changed, up about 1 point. We have the 2-year yield 4.14%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's up 2 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. To earnings we go. This morning we heard from AutoZone. It reported comparable sales for the first quarter missed estimates. Its CEO did say, though, the company is, quote, well positioned for growth. Its shares are up about 0.5%. After the bell, we hear from GameStop and also Dave & Buster's. Meanwhile, Vail Resorts, they posted smaller quarterly loss than expected, and that boosted shares up about 4%. And finally, Taiwan Semiconductor. Revenue jumped 34% to $8.5 billion in November. That was on sustained AI demand. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Looking over at the economic data, this bears note. We got a little bit of action on the screen. Unit labor costs were 1.9%. The survey was a lower statistic, 1.3%, and they clock in at 0.8%.
Huh.
It's quarterly data. I don't want to make too much of it, but Paul, I'm sorry, the productivity story is just extraordinary.
Yep, non-farm productivity, 2.2%, kind of right in line with last month, right in line with the consensus. Folks are, again, the productivity is the call you've been mentioning.
Story.
It's
a huge story.
It's been that way since the pandemic. I was shocked.
And again, it doesn't play to like what's going to happen in January. It's a longer term feel. Our economic indicators, including that brilliant analysis by Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Exactly.
It's brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors. They are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. Paul said Balchunas is going to show up. I looked at my watch and it says 8:32.
Not happening. Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay. Joining us from somewhere between Philadelphia and New York, Eric Balchunas, senior ETF analyst, Bloomberg Intelligence. Eric, just a simple, is there money enough to keep the Bitcoin ETF juggernaut going into 2025?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question. I mean, look, when something has such a run, it's hard to be bullish, but Bitcoin seems to be, look, there's just a lot of headwinds have turned into tailwinds. The regulatory environment, this idea that it might be used as a reserve. There's many more narratives now than just, oh, there's ETFs. And that's powerful. And by the way, the ETFs are just relentless. iBit took in like 2.6 billion over the past week. I mean, these are massive numbers. So when you have multiple narratives, it's tough to bet against something. That said, it's up a ton. So, I don't know. I guess I'm cautiously optimistic.
So where are you seeing, in your team, Eric, where are you seeing the flows as we think about 2025? Where do you think the ETF play is going to be next year?
Yeah, you know what I've been hearing a lot about is equal weighting and small caps. We just had John Davi from Astoria Advisors on our podcast. He had 10 ETFs that he likes for next year. He's an ETF strategist. He really likes small cap quality. He thinks that part of the market is due. You got to diversify out of your Magnificent Seven. RSP is another one that's starting to see flows already. That's equal weighted S&P. So you have like a mid cap tilt in there. So I think a lot of people are going to do that. I think they're going to stay in equities, but they're probably going to like trim their Mag 7 a little bit. That said, we all said the same thing this time last year. So I say that with somewhat of a grain of salt, but that's what I think people are going to be starting to do.
The moonshot on Bitcoin, Paul, on a weekly chart, well outside 2 standard deviations, up, and away. Right now, for it to go from this peak level down a negative 2 standard deviations would be down 55%.
Oh.
To 42,000-ish, 43,000-ish.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be a move that gets your attention. Hey, Eric, I know you and your team did a deep dive piece of research here looking at passive investing. When I think ETFs, I think of passive investing. I don't think about active ETFs. I still haven't figured out what an active ETF is and why I would do that. But talk to us about passive investing in your world of ETFs.
Yeah, no, there's plenty of active is a big theme going forward. ETF, listen, Paul, ETF is like an MP3. You can put any kind of music in it. You know, it's not just, one genre. So ETF's a vehicle. Active is a growing genre of that vehicle. But passive definitely is the bedrock and foundation of ETFs. And we, Athanasios and my team did a deep dive, basically pushing back against the passive bubble worries. We just haven't found data that stocks that are highly owned by S&P do any better or worse than ones that aren't. We also find that if you look in countries where passive isn't a big deal, active has the same underperformance rates. Also, passive isn't always passive. Like a lot of passive is smart beta. It'd be like a dividend ETF or a fundamentally weighted ETF. Heck, even the S&P 500 isn't passive. It's there's fundamental screens in it, and there's an active committee that oversees it and can like basically have full control. It's arguably active, and it's just large caps. So nothing really is passive. And then finally, the NVIDIA eye test. NVIDIA was 300th stock in the S&P. All of a sudden, it's like second or third, and Tesla went down. Those movements in the weightings of the S&P totally determined by active. So active still driving the car. Passive obviously is an amplification voice, but it's not driving things.
Eric, you're one of the definitive voices in the world on who invented all this, and that would be Vanguard. Vanguard right now is going through a massive reorg. I give him courage in that they're not screwing around. They're really moving the deck chairs, whether it's the Titanic or not. What's Vanguard trying to accomplish? Who does Vanguard want to be more like?
It's a great question. So Vanguard obviously went external for a CEO for the first time half a year ago with Salim Ramji from BlackRock, their main competitor. And then they just hired a Fidelity executive to run their wealth management business, which, as Tim Buckley says, is engine number 2 after their funds business. That's huge. Tom, you and I are both old enough, and Paul, to remember that Fidelity was the mortal enemy of Vanguard for about 20 years there. So it's interesting that they've got their old mortal enemy and their new mortal enemy both sort of running the ship. But I think Vanguard is morphing at all times. And, in my opinion, and that's why I called my book The Bogle Effect and not The Vanguard Effect. Bogle was the anomaly in physics. Vanguard, we don't know what's going to happen with Vanguard. It may be run by people who went to business school and have the same sort of mindset. Bogle was the one of one, and that's why I called the book that. But Vanguard certainly is not the Titanic. I will say that. It's going to lead in flows this year or be very close with BlackRock.
Interesting.
Once again, they're taking about $1 billion a day in their ETF business. That's a lot of money. So everything's going well. I think you're going to see a more modernized, aimed at millennials, customer service friendly form of Vanguard the next year.
What are kind of your key themes going into 2025, Eric, in the ETF space? Is it flows? Is it certain themes you're looking at? What are some of the big trends you think in 2025 we're going to really pay attention to?
So just 2 big ones right now. And our outlook is coming out this week. Number one, we're looking at how the ETF business is sort of resembling pharma in that the new white space is your feelings. There's asset classes are all taken up. But like buffer ETFs aim to cure boomers' anxiety. Bonds didn't work in 2022, so they have these target outcome structure product ETFs to guarantee outcomes. And then 2X single stock ETFs are aimed to cure your boredom if you're a younger sort of gen trader. So I think there's a lot of movement towards, people's psyches. In addition, look for ETF.
Eric, is this just marketing fluff? I mean, come on. What are you going to have, a gluten-free ETF for Lisa Mateo?
There is a vegan ETF, Tom. I seriously.
No, there's not. Oh, my God.
No, there is. VEGN.
VEGN.
Tom, listen, if you can think of it, it's already been ETFized probably. But look, the other big theme that I just want to get in here real quick is that this year, they're probably going to approve ETFs being allowed to be share classes of mutual funds. Vanguard did it and had a patent, but that patent's expired. So there's like 40 issuers looking to do this. When they do that, look for a ton of money to filter to the ETF class. So in the next 2-3 years, the flows this year are $1 trillion. They may be able to top that as we see this, massive migration from the mutual fund share classes to the ETF share class.
VEGN top holdings: Tesla, Broadcom, Apple, Alphabet, Nvidia. I mean, I don't know. It's a techie thing.
Eric, is your train on schedule today? Like, are we going to see
he's not going anywhere, please.
Well, it was on Monday, but we didn't do the hit, but I was totally on time. In fact, I got there at like 9:30.
Ooh, early.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was going to grab you a cup of coffee, but you weren't in.
Eric, when's the next book out? Seriously.
I have one in the works. It does involve your BitDog theme, which I know you love. But it'd be BitDog for dummies kind of thing. But it hasn't been signed yet, but that would be sometime in the next year or two.
Very good. Eric Balchunas, thank you so much. On Bitcoin, timely, to say the least. To say he's senior ETF analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, barely describes. As you say, Paul, he does a seminar.
Yeah.
You can hear a pin drop.
Yeah, and it's standing room only everywhere we take him around the world.
Around the world. Eric Balchunas, thank you so much. Red and green on the screen. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. An arrest in the murder of insurance executive Brian Thompson in New York. Let's get the very latest with Bloomberg's John Tucker.
The alleged killer is 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. He was spotted by a customer in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Authorities say in his backpack they found a 3D printed pistol and a 3D printed black silencer. They also found a 3-page manifesto. NYPD Chief of Detectives Joseph Kenny.
We don't think that there's any specific threats to other people mentioned in that document, but it does seem that he has some ill will toward corporate America.
Mangione attended an elite Baltimore prep school, graduating as valedictorian in 2016. He went on to earn undergraduate and graduate degrees in computer science from the University of Pennsylvania. His family owns a country club north of Baltimore. He worked as a data engineer at TrueCar. A survey of his online presence shows he praised the manifesto of another Ivy League graduate known for violent acts, the Unabomber. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu testified in his long-running corruption trial. Netanyahu told a court in Tel Aviv that the charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust against him are an ocean of absurd. President-elect Donald Trump's pick for intelligence chief Tulsi Gabbard is making her case on Capitol Hill. The former Democrat turned Republican continued visiting senators Monday to secure confirmation votes. Gabbard is attempting to calm fears about her being trusted with sensitive national security issues, given her meeting with just ousted Syrian President Bashar Al-Assad a few years ago.
My own views and experiences have been shaped by my multiple deployments and seeing firsthand the cost of war and the threat of Islamist terrorism.
Gabbard defended the trip, saying it's important to have open dialogue. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Michael Barr. Starting to get in the II survey. If you're part of Global Wall Street, your life changes if it's an II survey win. Institutional investor, I guess his life won't change because Ian Lingen here of BMO Capital Markets, number one, number two. But Paul, they've changed the survey name to Extel. Why would you do that?
Well, Extel always was the European version of this survey. So maybe there's now some tie-up between Institutional Investor Magazine and Extel.
There have been like 14 mergers. I mean, Reuters involved Thomson.
Yep.
United Newspapers a million
Right,
years ago.
exactly.
But to us, it is always and forever institutional investor.
Yeah, and every year it comes out at October, and for an analyst on the sell side for several generations, it makes or breaks your career. Each rung up on the II back in the day was worth $1 million in compensation. I mean, literally, if you went third team to second team, second team to first team, and that's how it was.
Like at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, somebody gets a win, and it's like $1 million later, way back then.
You walk right into your boss's office. Exactly.
I just made II. My
Hello.
life has changed. Ian Lingat of BMO Capital Markets, congratulations on the Extel II survey. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures mix, and this is after the S&P 500 slipped from nearly overbought technical levels on Monday. We'll start with NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 21 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 99 points. S&P futures little changed, up about a point. We have the 2-year yield 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's up 2 basis points. We have Brent crude lower, down 0.2%, $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. We have spot gold higher, $2,677 an ounce. And the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Deal-making news, we have Stellantis and CATL. They plan to invest as much as £4.1 billion. They're going to build an EV factory plant over in Spain. And shares of Alaska Airlines up 9%, boosted fourth quarter adjusted earnings per share. The board approved a $1 billion share repurchase program, and it also unveiled plans for a global expansion. And that is good news because more people are apparently flying. The International Air Transport Association, it says the global airline industry, well, it stands to earn $36.6 billion in net income next year. And that's thanks to a record 5.2 billion passengers. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, up until very recently, I thought the image on the Alaska Airlines tail was Jerry Garcia.
Why would you think? Okay.
Because it looks just like Jerry Garcia, but then a pilot of Alaska Airlines said, "No, knucklehead, it's an Eskimo, you dumb." So there you go. I mean, this was recent.
Really?
Yes.
Learning
really
lesson.
On top of that brand marketing.
Exactly. This poor pilot was just like, "What are you thinking, dude?"
Joining us right now, Ellen Wald, Senior Fellow of the Atlantic Council. And what's great is we look at the complete total turmoil of the Eastern Mediterranean. I don't even know where to start. I've been transfixed by it for 5 days, 6 days. We've had some great guests, including yesterday. Ellen Wald is definitive. Her one volume on the Saudi royalty, Saudi, is just absolutely definitive, and of course on oil and that. Ellen, I get out the distance from Latakia and the Russian port, and I get over to Tripoli and Tobruk in Libya, and the Russians have to move 800 miles to reset up their bases, perhaps. What is the significance of that to the Arab world, that Russia, ally of the former Syria, has to move? What's the so what of that?
I think the so what is that there is an opportunity here to fill a small power vacuum that had been filled by Iran and Russia. When Iran turned around that oil tanker, just as news that Assad had left Syria hit, that was a sign that they are not supporting this regime anymore. Russia retreating, another sign. I think that it's both a lack of resources, I think, on the part of Russia, but and also a strategic decision here. And that says to me that there is an opportunity here for Saudi Arabia and also the Gulf states to potentially move in. They've got money, they've got fuel, they've got aid, and they could be the definitive the definitive force in the new Syria.
Right.
And this is an opportunity they may not want to let pass them by.
I mean, the drama for some of this is Peter O'Toole as T.E. Lawrence going mental over Sykes-Picot and the partition of Syria. 5, 6, 8 years later from that, you have the true partition of Syria. Do you just assume, maybe led by the Saudis, we're going to have a new partition of Syria?
That's an interesting thought. I think one of the things that we've learned is that despite the fact that all of these borders and all of these lines were drawn, by the British, although the Sykes-Picot Agreement, everyone forgets that there was actually the Sykes-Picot-Sazonov Agreement, and that Russia was originally part of it. So Russia's got a hand in that too. Is that these lines are actually here to stay, as arbitrary and bizarre they may have been. They're here to stay, and so I don't think that Syria is going to be divided or any different, or the borders will look all that different. I do think that the recent Israeli encroachment in the north of Israel to kind of extend their buffer there is interesting and could be a source of tension in the future. But I do think that Lebanon is going to remain Lebanon and Syria will remain Syria. What it looks like and how strong of a state it is remains to be seen.
Ellen, I don't know. I'm pretty surprised that with all the turmoil we've seen in the Middle East over the last year, and now most recently with Syria, I still got Brent crude at like $71, $72 a barrel. I'm surprised it's not a lot higher. Should I be surprised, or what's going on there?
Well, what's interesting is that, yes, it's an important and a major event in the Middle East, and definitely injects more instability into the region, despite the fact that Assad's rule was not what it once was, and that he was a very brutal dictator. He was still a fairly stabilizing force. At the same time, though, Syria is not a major oil producer. It had enough oil and natural gas to satisfy its own needs, and I think they exported a little bit, but it's not a major producer. And I do think that at this point, really what we're seeing is that analysts are much more concerned with, troubling economic forecasts, and also these forecasts that supply is set to grow in 2025, and this potential for a supply, an oversupply. And they're much more focused on that than they are with, with what's going on in Syria as a destabilizer for the oil market.
Ellen, I play off Sergei Vakulenko's work at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And the basic idea here is we knew OPEC Plus, which I guess is Riyadh talked to Moscow. Is that dead?
OPEC Plus is not dead. OPEC Plus seems very much alive. The fact that they were able to put together such a comprehensive agreement, and a complicated one as well, to stave off these planned production increases, I think shows that there's still a lot of negotiation going on. There's still a lot of open lines of communication. And OPEC Plus is still alive and kicking, although for every month that they push off the planned increases, the pressure is going to grow to eventually put that oil back on the market.
Ellen, I'm a big fan of the TV series Landman on Paramount Plus, so I feel like I'm an expert now in the U.S. oil and gas industry. What are our domestic folks, our friends down in Texas and Louisiana and Oklahoma, are they still pumping the maximum amount of oil they can? What are they doing down there?
So right now we're seeing U.S. production at some of its highest levels ever. I mean, we are currently the largest oil producer in the world. The question is, how long is that going to be sustained, particularly now that the region down there is dominated by large, international oil players. We're talking Chevron and Exxon are really dominating now that they have bought out some of the small and larger players in the fracking area. So I think that their concerns, for example, Chevron says they want to focus on free cash flow, not production, not drilling. And I do think that we are likely to see a pullback in some respects, although there's still going to be, strong production coming from there. I know some concerns have been voiced about the fact that, the easy oil in the Permian is just about used up, but, that doesn't mean that there's no oil left and that we're not going to be producing from there for a long time.
So is there a glut of oil?
I don't think we're quite in glut stage, but there's the potential to get there.
So, I mean,
we're in a pre-glut phase.
I think what's been great in the last 10 years, the U.S. going from a net importer to a net exporter. Yeah, exactly. Who talks about peak oil anymore?
I talked to Ellen Wald like 20 years ago. I'm going peak oil. She says, "Shut up, Tom."
Yeah, watch Lawman. That's what,
Ellen
everything
Wald.
you need to know about the
Ellen, when do we get a new book? When do we get an update? Come on.
When do we get a new book? That's a good question. Not yet, but we've definitely got some interesting other things in the fire right now.
Very cool. Ellen, and Netflix is looking for that.
Yep.
Ellen Wald with us, your senior fellow at Atlantic Council. Her one-volume Saudi, really can't say. No. Oh, thank you, Ari. Saudi Inc. I'm sorry. I did it for the Netflix series. They changed it from Saudi Inc.
shorter.
Saudi.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Can we play Robert Cray?
Oh, always.
The weather's above 32.
Yep.
It's decent out, little rain. You got to play Robert Cray. That's all there is to it. Stay with us worldwide. Can't say enough about the focus here in our 9 o'clock hour. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateos. Michael Barr here today?
I think so.
Getting ready. He's getting ready for Lions. And
boy.
They play this huge game coming up here. Yep. Bills, Lions. Michael Barr's getting ready for that. I believe that's on Sunday. We say good morning to all of you. We're getting ready for CPI tomorrow. China, I saw the FT headline, deflation.
Deflation in China?
Price
really?
decline.
Okay. All right.
True price decline. We're not there.
No, we're not there. No, we've got CPI. I'm just kind of looking ex-food and energy year on year.
Yeah.
Consensus is 3.3%. I don't know. I mean, how bad is that?
Oh, we're gonna have to see. What we know is we got an interesting market here on a Tuesday into that important economic data as well. And of course, as Paul, you mentioned earlier, I missed it yesterday. Hershey's, that's American.
It's amazing.
Mondelez is going to take
Hershey's.
out Hershey's of America?
And the Hershey Trust, which controls 80% of the vote. So you have to win over the Hershey family
It's
/
like the family.
trust. Yeah, exactly. Late 1800s, that company's been around. So we'll see.
First time I was ever scared of an athlete. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Mike Nicoluk, Hershey Bears. He went back and forth between the NHL and the AHL. Hershey Bears.
Yep.
He was like ginormous. He was huge. I looked at him when he was playing against the Rochester Americans. Are you kidding me? Good morning, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Good morning, Finland. We mentioned that. Good morning around the world as well. Bloomberg Surveillance were brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insights, they can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. And we thank BNY for their support this morning. From the Interactive Broker Studios, a Bloomberg Business Flash. Here's Lisa.
And we've got not much movement in futures. Traders still looking to that key inflation data this week to continue to monitor the upsurge also in geopolitical risk in the Middle East, so they're balancing those two. Right now, NASDAQ futures, little changed, up 9 points. Dow futures down about 1/10%, 77 points. S&P futures are little changed. The 2-year yield, 4.13%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.23%, and that's up 2 basis points. The Stocks Europe 600 index, well, that snapped an 8-day streak of gains. That's after China's top leadership promised looser policy in 2025. Right now, it's down about 0.1%. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.1%. We have shares of Oracle. Well, they're off about 7%. Earnings missed high expectations. And then yesterday, a decline in Nvidia shares. Well, that helped push the S&P 500 lower. Before the bell, though, those shares little changed. News that China probing the company over alleged anti-monopoly violations. And finally, shares of Google parent Alphabet up more than 3%. The company announced its quantum computer. Well, it needs just 5 minutes to solve a problem that would take supercomputers around 10 septillion years. That's right. What? That is your... A septillion is 1 followed by 24 zeros, just to give you a better idea.
No, thank you.
That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Is septillion the number of zeros over the next contract Steve Cohen signs?
Yep, exactly.
Could be. We'll have to see.
Juan Soto.
This is an honor right now. Dean Maki joins us now, chief economist at Point72, Steve Cohen's shop. And we're thrilled he's there. And we can make jokes about Juan Soto and all that with the New York Mets, except this is too important of a conversation. So, Dean, you're sitting down with Mr. Cohen, and he's looking like, I got to write out $700 million large. And so did you say, quote, this data, Steve, suggests some scope for a pickup in real consumer spending growth over the next, 51 years? The length of the contract. I mean, Dean, did you pitch Steve Cohen an optimism on American economic growth so he could sign the great Soto?
I'm afraid I didn't give him specific advice on that signing.
The transaction, okay.
Economic.
Well, let's go to the heart of it, which is whether it's Juan Soto or any other sports type or business planning, it's based on animal spirit. Do you see nominal GDP falling down to some distress level?
Not at this point, no. I think the momentum is quite solid in the economy right now. There may be some headwinds next year, depending on how much tariffs are put in place, how much immigration restrictions are put in place. But as of right now, the momentum in the economy is quite strong.
Hey, Dean, did you and your team, when you woke up the day after the election and we have President Trump coming back to the White House, we now have a pretty solid red wave, I guess, in the House and the Senate. Did that change your economic outlook for 2025 at all?
I think the main things that I'm concerned about is the magnitude of the tariffs and the immigration restrictions, because tariffs do, virtually any economist will tell you tariffs will lead to price increases and slower growth. So we're just going to have to wait and see how much those are put in place. Immigration restrictions also mean slower growth in the labor supply. And that means either job growth is going to be slower, or it means that the labor market is going to tighten much faster than it has been. So those are the things that I'm concerned about looking forward.
So given that backdrop, what do you think your Federal Reserve is going to do here in this December meeting, and then maybe in that first half of next year?
We think that the Fed will cut next week, unless the CPI and PPI numbers point to a really ugly core PCE reading for November. But if that's sort of in line with where it's been, then I think the Fed does plan to cut, and they will do so. But we also think they're going to switch to a quarterly pace of rate cuts starting in Q1. So they'll slow down the pace of cuts and just watch to see what happens on the inflation front.
Dean, the Maki economics is a Stanford economics. In the whole heart of Boskin, Taylor, the other giants of Stanford, even over on the financial side with Bill Sharp, is get out of the way and let us grow. So if President-elect Trump says to Steve Cohen as he's trying to get season tickets because of Juan Soto, if President-elect Trump says get out of the way and let the economy grow, does that ring true to you that could happen?
I think the economy is growing quite solidly right now, and that will continue absent any shocks. So I think that the momentum is quite solid. Consumers have strong wage and salary income growth. Corporate profits are very strong. So the setup is quite nice for continued growth, as long as policy, in a sense, doesn't interfere with it.
Yeah, but I got to go Pete Peterson on you, the late, great Pete Peterson. Dean Maki, whether it's charge card debt or the fiscal debt of the nation, are we grossing up our debt while we enjoy the Maki boom?
I mean, there is a long-run fiscal issue in the U.S. We're running deficits that are too high in general, and they don't seem to be coming down in a significant way, and it doesn't seem to be a major part of the agenda for either party at this point. So I do think that's a long-run issue. It doesn't seem to be a short-term issue that's preventing investors from buying treasuries at this point. So that will be the true test, is when investors say, we think the debt is too high. Right now, they're not saying that. The 10-year treasury yield is 4.15 or something like that. And so it's not as though investors are balking at buying treasuries.
Dean, what's your view of this underlying U.S. consumer here? We're kind of right in the holiday period. People are out there buying gifts for Christmas and Hanukkah and all the other things. How do you view the consumer these days?
I think the consumer is in quite solid shape. Wage and salary income is growing something like 5.5%, and inflation, headline inflation, has fallen down to, on a short-term basis, under 2%. So real income growth, labor income growth is quite strong at this point. Plus, the household wealth to income right now is higher than it's been at any point in the 70 years prior to COVID. So households are wealthier than they've ever been on average, and they have strong income growth. So that's why I think consumer spending has been strong and will continue to be so going forward.
Dean, when you're at the Mets Stadium, because you have to go to 10 games a year to keep your job, do you sit in the clover seats? Oberman sits down there. The clover, wow. the Clover Club seats right down like row 1, row 4. Is that where you sit?
I have sat in those seats at times. They are very, very nice seats.
I love it. Dean Maki, thank you so much. I love busting his chops. It is great. May I point out, folks, that Dr. Maki has bulletproof academics from his time at Barclays. Mr. Cohen saw that and said, bring that lad over to 0.72, and he's delivered the goods for Mr. Cohen in giving great macroeconomic analysis tied into the policies of America. We hope to see Mr. Maki at the Clover Club seats.
Yes.
Detroit Tigers, New York Mets. Oberman sits like 3-4 rows in front of you because, Keith Oberman's ginormous. I mean, he gets the rock star seats.
Told you you look like Magnum PI. Man.
Tigers, Mets. I think we could see it. I hope Mr. Cohen's listening. Steve, he and I go way back, so we'll have to see. Juan Soto is a Met?
Yeah.
Really?
Just, Scott Boras is your agent. You just go with the highest dollar amount.
Okay,
Boom.
there we are. There's the analysis you
Yep.
need. Dean Maki, seriously, 0.72. Thank you. Optimism on the American economy. With your news in New York City, is Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Luigi Mangione is officially charged with the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Police say Mangione was carrying a handgun in his backpack days after the shooting. Mangione was found in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania authorities say that Mangione was carrying a passport and $10,000 in cash, $2,000 of it in foreign currency. NYPD Chief of Detectives Joseph Keene says Mangione was also carrying incriminating items, including handwritten pages.
He's frustrated with the healthcare system in the United States. Specifically, he states how we are the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet the life expectancy of an American is ranked 42 in the world.
Mangione comes from a prominent Maryland family which owns multiple country clubs in the state. He graduated from Gilman, an elite all-boys private school, one of the highest ranked in the country.
We all knew each other. I wasn't particularly close with him, but I knew of him. I knew him somewhat well. He was a nice kid.
Mangione then attended the Ivy League's University of Pennsylvania, earning a bachelor and master's degree in computer science. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned gang violence and death in Haiti. Spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Stéphane Dujarric.
The Secretary General calls on the Haitian authorities to conduct a thorough investigation and ensure that perpetrators to these and all other human rights abuses and violations are brought to justice.
The UN's Dujarric says Guterres reiterated his call for financial and logistical support to help the Haitian National Police Department to address gang violence. Celebrations continue in Syria after the 50-year family rule of dictator Bashar Al-Assad came to a sudden end when rebels seized the country. Some state workers failed to return to their jobs, and the United Nations officials said the country's public sector had come to a complete and abrupt halt. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
We need a theater update right now. You know, Tuesday, we're sort of getting ready for the week. Do these movies have legs? I mean, is there an identification here that the big movies of the holiday season are doing well?
Yeah, they're doing very well. I mean, great Thanksgiving season, which kind of kicks off the whole Christmas holiday season into December, which is the second biggest season after the summer. So all good, you know.
I saw Lord of the Rings tanked. You know,
Did
got
it?
like 12 people went.
Okay.
But I just don't,
Moana.
You know,
It's Moana 2. That was
to me, it's like everybody's going to Moana 2.
Yeah.
Lisa, did we go see Moana 2?
No, she's not going.
I'm not going to
Her
see
kids are grown. Her
Moana.
daughter's too old
I love
for
The
that.
Rock to death, but I will not. I'll watch it from my couch when it comes out.
We will. I just watched them. I paid $20 to watch a movie from the couch.
Oh, you
What's
did?
that about? I thought that was outrageous. Futures up 4. Stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Futures Report sponsored by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, we have investors kind of in this holding pattern. This is ahead of more inflation data tomorrow, the Consumer Price Index, initial jobless claims, PPI on Thursday. Meantime, U.S. small business optimism, that surged in November to a 3-year high. So we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.1%, 37 points. Dow futures down about 0.2%, 95 points. S&P futures are little changed, up about 4. The 2-year yield, 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.22%, and that's up 2 basis points. We have Brent crude at $72 a barrel, WTI crude at $68 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. We have Boeing making news. Reuters reporting it's restarted production of the 737 MAX. It took place on Friday, and that's a month after that strike shut down manufacturing pressuring its shares up more than 1.5%. And a few stocks on the move. Designer Brands down 19%. It's the parent company of footwear and accessories chain DSW, cut its adjusted earnings per share guidance for the full year. And finally, database software company MongoDB off 7%, announced the departure of its CFO and COO Michael Gordon. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Look at the two big stories right now. The fires out on the West Coast. We're trying to effort an expert on that. And, of course, we've got Syria continuing as well. We're lining it up. Our crack control room, size on top of it.
Oh, yeah. He's on top of it. I mean, look at all the people we got back.
I just think DMAC is here, and I just put out on Twitter, on May 14th, you can enjoy the Pirates against Juan Soto.
Really?
Tickets from like $13 or something small.
But he's gonna he's gonna put fannies in the seats.
2 days later, the New York Yankees visit Citi Field. Tickets from $103.
Yep.
8 times more than the Pirates.
No doubt.
2 days.
I'll be at the Pirates
later.
game. Yeah, that'll probably
that's exciting.
That's how I roll.
I mean, I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
it's great. I mean, it's great for the obviously great for the
Mets. It's a big loss for the Yankees.
It's a huge loss for the Yankees.
He can catch the ball.
Yes, and he can hit the ball is really his big thing. So it's fun for New York.
I wish this was a 3-hour conversation. It's not. He's shockingly qualified with all the punditry that's out there right now on the Levant, on the Eastern Mediterranean, from Erdogan through the Strait into the Mediterranean and across to Libya and beyond. Mick Mulroy joins us now. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and just hugely qualified. Mick, what's the first meeting the Pentagon has as they look at a potential partition of Syria?
So I think great to be with you guys. I think the first meeting they have is who is in control of the major weapon systems in Syria right now, which includes chemical weapons and potentially biological weapons. We can obviously see Israel's been trying to mitigate that threat with airstrikes. And the second, I think, is what you just went to. What do we need to do to ensure that our SDF partners, the Syrian Democratic Force partners that we have in eastern Syria, are protected? And what are we going to do to ensure that ISIS does not take this as an opportunity to reconstitute itself, which it certainly might. And I think that's why we're seeing so many strikes, not just from Israel, but the United States. I think 75 in one day against ISIS targets, because they are concerned that they're going to look at this as a major opportunity.
On a percentage basis, you're talking to politicians who, are mouthy about it but have no experience. On a percentage basis, how dominant is the ISIS influence in governing this fractured nation versus the other percentages of the Kurds or the supporters of Turkey or even the Druze? I mean, what's the percentage ISIS influence?
So that is a very important question and a difficult one, because the groups that made up this coalition, this opposition force, largely came from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So if you look at Golani, he was in Al-Qaeda in Iraq. He was sent by Baghdadi, the ISIS leader, to Syria to create a actual front there for Al-Qaeda. That was al-Nusra, where he was called the emir. And then he separated from those two groups. But many of his fighters do have allegiances to ISIS, do have allegiances to Al-Qaeda. So the question is Golani really the reformed individual he claims to be? I don't think any statements he makes are going to make that determination. It's going to be actions. But if he still has significant ties to ISIS, then they will have a stronger, much stronger influence in the government. And of course, they really are going to look at this as an opportunity to try to reconstitute themselves. Attacks by ISIS right now are up 300% since last year. So this is something that they've been looking for, an opportunity like this. They're going to try to take it. It's going to be up to the United States and our partners to really ensure that they don't capitalize on it.
Mick, what do you think the role of the U.S. will be under the Biden administration as well as the incoming Trump administration in Syria?
So I think on the short term, it's going to be probably a plus up. I don't know if it'll be troops on the ground. We have 900 there. We could add more troops, but primarily assets that can take care of those individuals and make sure that we have all the force protection that we need, because they could easily take an opportunity to start attacking our positions with all the chaos it's currently undergoing in the transformational government that's going on in Damascus. So I think that'll be the near term. The long term will be whether when President Trump comes in again, he's going to look at reducing force presence there, whether his team will, and I know his team coming in, will really push to really understand the consequences of a full withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria right now might be catastrophic, not only to, the enduring defeat of ISIS, but our standing and our influence in the region, which is obviously something that we want to maintain.
Mick Mulroy with us, the former Assistant Secretary of Defense. Out on YouTube, folks, Pistol Pete, thank you so much. He calls it Libya 2.0, hearkening to the Libyan Civil War 2014 to the beginning of the century. Mick Mulroy, Russia doesn't care about that. They're expanding airfields in Libya. All of a sudden, they have to get the map out and remember Tobruk of World War II. Is Putin just basically going to move from Syria over to a friendly Libya?
That's an opportunity, of course. He wants to find out whether he can keep the current warm weather port at Tartus. He also has an air base he utilizes at Latakia. I think he thinks he can still negotiate with whatever government's coming in to maintain that. I don't know if that's the case. I think we really need to push on our NATO ally Turkey and to the influence they have to ensure that this is a sound strategic defeat for Russia, which means they're out of Syria, except for diplomatic efforts. But that's to be determined.
I got to squeeze this in. Has the American tone on the Levant, did it forever change with that horrific bombing during the time of President Reagan in Lebanon?
So it certainly was an inflection point when it comes to the U.S.'s view of that part of the world. Of course, hundreds of individuals, U.S. Marines primarily, were killed. The embassy was attacked. Many were killed there. And that, of course, was done by Hezbollah, who up until the time of 9/11 was the terrorist organization most responsible for killing Americans because of primarily the event you just referenced. But that was an inflection point of how we view ourselves in the Middle East, how we view ourselves as mediators in the all the conflicts that happen there, and as we're viewed by the people that are there. So I think that is a very important point and part of history.
Mick, thank you so much for just encyclopedic knowledge on this. He served under Secretary Mattis and Secretary Esper as well. Mick Mulroy with us, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. You got to believe he could get a position in the new administration.
Absolutely. I mean, former U.S. Marine infantry officer for 26 years. So we thank him for his service, of course.
Those are the conversations that we try to bring you folks here on international relations. We've got them lined up. We're going to really focus on the markets here and, of course, the economy, but we're going to keep attuned to all that's going on in the Middle East and, for that matter, other points around the globe. Red and green on the screen is a churn to the market today. It's a quiet churn, although the VIX improves down to 14.05. West Texas Intermediate oil, $68.40 the barrel. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. Don't forget on YouTube, it is our new distribution. Subscribe out on YouTube. Bloomberg Podcast. You'll get us 7 a.m. Eastern. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with a new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETF insights to learn more. All right, will we see any kind of movement in the markets? This is ahead of key inflation data out this week. It's been pretty quiet so far this morning. The big event, the Consumer Price Index tomorrow. So the markets are open. Let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500 right now, up about 0.1%, 5.6058. We have the Dow down 0.2%, 98 points, 44,299. The Nasdaq up 0.3%, 58 points at 19,794. The two-year yield 4.14%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.23%, and that's up about 3 basis points. We have Brent crude at $72 a barrel, WTI crude at $68 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. At the open, also want to check in with shares of Oracle. They are down 10%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that this morning. The glass is half full. We're really focusing, particularly our theme here into the end of the year, and frankly, staggering into January, will be this great bull market. And one of the things, pounding table bullish, I mean, it gets headlines or doom and gloom, go to cash, is to say you have to participate. Eric Friedman hits a ball out of the park with U.S. Bank, their asset management company. He's a CIO with decades of experience of just saying, you've got to participate. How do I participate into next year?
Yeah, Tom, I think this is a market where either you're neutral or you're overweight. The places we think you should be overweight are mid-caps domestically. We also think that still large-cap dividend payers. We like rate-sensitive names, in particular real estate. So this is still a market that has to be disproven before you hit the sell button.
Is a share buyback a dividend equivalent?
You know, my finance professors would say no, but I think the market is saying yes.
Sweeney would say no, too.
Yes, yeah. There is Mr. Sweeney with his great media background. I mean, there is a difference. I do think that there is some catch-up being played in the buyback game right now. A number of CFOs were late and are playing catch-up in a year-end. So I think that is going to be another catalyst for improved liquidity. So we still think he'd be involved. And look, you know, we're still sanguine about next year, but a little less optimistic than perhaps we were about the return profile for this year. So we're still thinking, 64.80 for the S&P. That's 24 times 270 operating for the S&P 500. That's about a 10-11% earnings growth, achievable, but not necessarily as buoyant as perhaps some of our competitors are on the marketplace right now.
2025, where's our S&P 500 going to be, and what has to happen to get us there?
Yeah, 64.80 is still our number. I think
okay.
that's it sounds very precise, Paul, but let's round up to 6,500. I think that the key thing for us is the expectations on Bloomberg Terminal are about a 13% earnings growth.
Yep.
We think it's going to be more like 10.5, 11. So that's not splitting hairs. I do think the key for the bond market is, do we see yields stay below 5%? That for us is the yellow light to red light, if you will. We have not had a 10-year Treasury yield above 5% in 17 years. We touched it intraday in 2023 for literally a day. Jay Powell came in, talked down rates, and since then it's obviously been more subdued. So 5% we think is still that bond vigilante number to pay attention to. Sub 5%, we're still bullish and still involved.
I see in your notes, Eric, that you guys are encouraged by the strength within real estate, both equity and credit. What is your view of real estate here? Because I still don't know how to call it here.
Yeah, it's still a slow-moving train.
Okay.
We think that, not to harken back to that 5% figure, at 5%, that makes the commercial real estate issue more of a national issue. We still think it's going to be more of a local office versus multifamily versus storage versus general property use. So with financing rates sub 5, that we think we're probably eke through this thing in a more of a gradual basis. But north of 5%, Paul, that's where real estate gets a little bit testy. So we still think that's a spot, especially on the debt side, which is not the easiest thing to play for most retail investors, but there's a lot of opportunity there. So the fact that we've been hanging in both equity and credit within real estate suggests that perhaps some of the worst is behind us, and there's kind of a grinded out higher environment from here.
My 28-year-old daughter about a year ago got into a Goldman Sachs Marcus account money market thing at like 5%. She got a 2-year CD or something like that. Star. What should I tell her to do with that cash now?
Yeah, it's been a tough conversation to get people out of, especially, Paul, our older customers who are really nostalgic, if you will, for finally seeing their cash rates improving. We think there's kind of a glide path out. Certainly would still emphasize equities, but, parts of the structured credit market, so asset-backed finance that you can actually access in mutual fund and in ETF format, it's not always just for institutional players. That's still spitting off a 5.5%, 6%, 7% yield, and it's not overly expensive. So those are spots that we think are worthwhile to consider.
Institutionally, are the Mag 7 under-owned?
I think they are. I think there are certainly the top end of the Mag 7 is well owned. If you think about the sort of, the bottom rung, if you will, and then also I think, Tom, that what's most under-owned right now is the mid-cap space. That continues to be a space that we think just does not have...
What will be the catalyst for mid-cap to go? I get weak dollar, international goes, it hasn't happened. What makes mid-cap go?
Yeah, I think the biggest would be on the financial services side, deregulation would be number one. Number two would, I still think, be in the real estate side, a decent glide path for office, which is not necessarily a slam dunk opportunity, but these are still companies that have indebtedness. These are companies that are not just equity finance. So again, a decent backdrop to financing we think is probably the key for mid-cap to unlock value.
What do you do with like beleaguered healthcare? I mean, we're talking Apple, Nvidia. Paul, have you sold your Nvidia yet?
Oh no, long.
Fine. But you got your Mag 7 winners. But the things that have dogged out this year, energy, are they a value trap, or can you climb on board that?
Yeah, I think midstream energy is a spot that we think, Tom, has the best of two worlds. One is income, and the second is some level of price appreciation. Look, the dollar continues to be the story. We'll see what tariff outlooks look like, but midstream is really cheap and certainly has a 6-7% yield attached to it. That's attractive for a lot of investors.
Skinny Atlas. I looked at Barnes Corners off the end of Lake Ontario with 400 inches of snow. Did you get hammered in Skinny Atlas?
Yeah, we did. We earned our snow days. It was a snow shoveler's delight.
You get the kids out there?
They were out there in their keep. That's the way it goes, at least. Yeah.
$7, no breakfast.
Yeah, a sweatshop. That's the way it is. That's how you learn about the dollar, the value of a dollar.
Go down the street with Jeff Auer and you shovel 2 driveways. Make more than you could caddy in for 6 hours. How much snow did you get?
My peak, I think, was like 220 feet, if you will, of just sheer white stuff, and I think it was the middle of my high school years. So that was a particularly buoyant year for my lower back.
That's how I got my job here at Bloomberg. They said, spell Skinny Atlas. I said, I can't. They said, you're hired. Eric Friedman, thank you so much. Optimism on the markets. It's not funny. There's no jokes. The images, this from CBS in Los Angeles, are absolutely frightening. It is the Santa Ana winds. Our Rob Carolyn, best in the business, joins now. Is this another fire, Rob Carolyn, or are these fires in Malibu this time different?
Well, it's fire season, Tom, and as you just mentioned, we've got the Santa Ana winds blowing across that area this morning. There is a red flag warning up for that region, as well as a high wind warning through 1 o'clock Pacific time for Malibu and some of the surrounding areas, all the way up through Oxnard. They're expecting some 20 to 40 mile an hour winds with gusts to 70 miles an hour, and that's why they have evacuated areas in Malibu. The good news for them is the winds should decrease in intensity later this afternoon, and there's the potential for some rain coming in off the Pacific with a storm Wednesday night and on into Thursday. So that would be very, very helpful, lower the fire danger. But red flag warnings are an extension right now all the way south of Los Angeles, not as far south as San Diego, but there's a wide section of the LA basin that does have red flag warnings in effect today and tomorrow.
Do you link these fires, not specifically Malibu, but the many fires of California, to climate change, to global warming, I guess, up 1.5 degrees, whatever, or to drought? I mean, do you link it in, or is it separate?
Well, there's another thing to link in there as well. One of the things we did when we did a study back a couple of years ago for the power companies out there on the West Coast is we find when they have normal precipitation or above normal precipitation like they did the last couple of years, it causes more vegetation growth. And then the following season, if the weather dries out like it's done so far this fall and winter, that increases the fire danger because there's more fuel for those fires. So they've had above normal precipitation on the West Coast the last 2 years in a row, and that's led to higher vegetation growth than normal, which now has increased the fuel for the fires.
It's like you can't win either way you go, it seems like, out there. So what is the feeling for this winter here? Will it be a wet winter, which is, again, good for the farmers, good for the firefighters, and maybe, I guess, good for the ski resorts, or is it going to be on the drier side? What's the expectation?
Well, the expectation, Paul, for Southern California is for it to be drier than normal because we're in a weak La Nina. So that should put the Pacific Northwest in the jackpot for precipitation, maybe into Northern California, where they did have an epic rain event back during the fall months. But now that the La Nina is starting to blossom there in the eastern Pacific, it would affect southern and central California with below normal precipitation, and we should see that track across much of the southern United States through the winter season.
I mean, Rob, bring it over to the east as well. I mean, I got New York City, where, when was the last time we had snow in Central Park?
A couple of years.
LBJ was president.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, Rob Carolyn, what is your prediction on the corridor from Washington up to Mount Katahdin for this snow season?
Well, it looks like for Katahdin westward to Mount Mansfield, they're probably going to see above normal snowfall. So in northern New England, once you get south of the White Mountains, the Green Mountains, the mountains in Maine, it looks like near to below normal snowfall all the way down into the mid-Atlantic states because of the La Nina. Usually what happens, Tom, is we see a lot of inside runners, storms passing up the Appalachians rather than up the East Coast. The storm coming up for tomorrow is going to be one of those. It's going to bring warm weather up the East Coast and lots of rain. It'll break some of the drought that we've been experiencing. On the backside of the system, I just heard you mention Skinny Atlas. They're probably going to see some lake effect snow develop Wednesday night into Thursday and Friday as some colder air comes in behind that system. We're looking at a pattern through at least the 20th to 21st that keeps temperatures below normal, but not a whole lot of snowfall. It looks like each time we warm up, we'll get rain rather than snow with these systems as they pass north and west of the city and the district.
So don't be the Grinch. I mean, from Boston down to Washington, are we going to get snow for Christmas?
The way it looks like right now, Tom, if you believe the 384-hour forecast out of the GFS, it looks like it rains Christmas Day.
Oh, God. Cindy Lou Who is
Cindy
I'm a mean one.
Yep.
Okay, you're a mean one, Rob Carolyn. Thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll see you here with East Coast weather again. That's what he does best. He's just got a grasp of this. It goes beyond the blah, blah, blah. Rob Carolyn, surveillance meteorologist here at Bloomberg. To me, and Paul, you grew up in these climes. I mean, where Michael Barr lives, there's like 6 feet of snow.
I know. He's out in the middle of nowhere.
Snow in June, under the pine trees. There's still snow there. It's just not like it used to be, right?
No, but I mean, I think the last 2 years, absolutely not, Tom. We haven't had any precipitation, which, again, at this point in my life, that's fine. But before, I felt like when my kids were growing up, we had plenty of snow and snow days and building forts and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Since I got my first Wall Street bonus in 1987, I haven't skied on the East Coast since. I just kind of got spoiled by going out west with the good snow and the nice, reasonable climate out there and sunshine as opposed to freezing.
John's out on YouTube talking about Doug's Fish Fry and Skinny Atlas. Nathan Hager emails in. I thought he's already in the Bloomberg Daybreak nap.
Yeah.
Nathan Hager emails in, and he can spell Skinny Atlas.
I didn't even know where that is.
That's gorgeous. Okay. It's like unbelievable.
Okay.
Like Victorian.
I'm Google mapping it right now.
Victorian Finger Lakes beauty.
Okay.
Like Cooperstown.
Yep.
James Fenimore Cooper.
I'm Google
Washington
mapping it
Irving,
now. Okay. Whoa, the Finger Lakes. I got you. I'm with you there.
They drink Utica Club.
All right.
You don't know what Utica Club is.
Oh, I know what Utica Club is.
Utica?
Yeah.
Michael Barr's never had a Utica Club. I mean,
no.
Very few brews that I haven't tried.
Oh.
Upstate New York. The hardy people up there, that's all I can say.
It's very hardy. That's what that lake of snow is, particularly.
Near the Cuse.
Father says, no dinner till you shovel the driveway. And you're like, okay with that. Red and green industry. The markets are open. Down negative 171. Little lift. NASDAQ giving me some love, actually. Let me get your percentage change. On the NASDAQ 100, up 0.4%. It just won't quit, I say.
Yep.
The VIX 14.19. Big dog, look to the Alex Steele hour here at 10 o'clock. 97,000, up 1,000 on Bitcoin.
Sure. Yep.
Next rally.
It's round.
I mean, Belchun is...
It hits 100,000, then it's got a little bit of an
it's
issue.
A pause.
Yeah.
It's like down 10,000.
Yep.
We're looking for 200,000. From New York City, stay with us. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have stocks, well, seeing some small moves. Traders just unwilling to make any big moves in the run-up to the Consumer Price Index. That's going to give the Fed a final look at pricing environment. This is ahead of their meeting the following week. Today, though, we did learn U.S. labor costs grew less than initially estimated in the third quarter. That was after a downwardly revised decline in the prior 3 months. Let's start with the Nasdaq, up about 0.6%, 130 points, 19,867. The Dow, down 0.3%, 131 points, 44,274. And the S&P 500 up 0.1%, 7 points at 6,060. The 2-year yield 4.13%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.22%, and that's up 1 basis point. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. We have shares of Alphabet. They're up about 5%, unveiling breakthroughs made with the use of its new Willow quantum chip. Then on the flip side, you have Oracle. They're down 8% after its results failed to impress. And finally, Alaska Air up 12%. Boosted fourth quarter adjusted earnings per share forecast, unveiled plans for a global expansion, and can't forget the board approved a $1 billion share repurchase program. Some earnings after the bell. We'll hear from GameStop and Dave & Buster's. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it here this morning. An annual visit. This is with Gene Soroka. And it's a really important visit because it's something we take it for granted. If you look on 3rd Avenue, in all the boxes, the trucks.
They go through his port, I think.
They go through his port or that port. His port is the West Coast, Los Angeles. They just lost one soda. What was that about? And he joins us now with over a decade of heavyweight experience in this. What's the number one difference between Newark and Los Angeles in terms of processing our stuff? What's the West Coast, East Coast distinction?
Yeah, I think it's geography. You know, here, the New York, New Jersey port that's run by Beth Rooney is best in class. And Beth's been a friend for a long time. You're within 2 days of 2/3 of the population of the United States.
Wow, brilliant.
So you're really close. In Los Angeles, we're very close to that $33 trillion Asia economy. There's nobody that can get the goods from Asia to the United States faster than we can in Los Angeles. And then we've built the infrastructure, Tom, both there as well as the connectivity by rail and interstate system to get the goods out.
The wrap here, and Paul and I covered this with the strikes on the East Coast, is the unions are so powerful that we're technologically deficient versus other ports around the world. You're going to tell me I'm nuts when I just said that. Are we technologically deficient because of the power of the unions?
No, we're not, but this is the most polarizing conversation in our industry because what the American worker sees so far is that ports that implement robotics or go to an automated environment immediately cut jobs. And that's not the case in other places like in Hamburg, run by Jens Meyer. He found a way to keep the workforce stable while growing capacity through robotics.
How?
And now, because it was a promissory commitment with the work councils in Germany.
Like Germany?
Yes.
Why can't we do that here?
Jens is one of my closest friends in the industry, and I lean on him for that education on a regular basis. We need to start the conversation here in the United States with zero job attrition to move forward with a technology that can grow capacity. And from there, the conversation is all upside.
This goes back to COVID and that. And frankly, the great financial crisis, Paul, where Germany just said, no, we're going to keep people employed.
Yeah,
you know, I just don't get it.
All right, folks, if you're sitting in front of the terminal, MAP Go, M-A-P Go, then you click on vessels and you can see where all the commercial cargo ships and all that kind of stuff are on a global basis. I'm looking at your Long Beach, LA port. I don't see a lot of ships waiting off the port. You guys have them in port. Talk to us about what the activity is like at your port these days.
Paul, this year will be our second best in our 117-year history. And the stat that I love the most is that from July to October 31st, we moved more cargo than we did during that surge during COVID, and not one ship was backed up. The cargo velocity, the teamwork, the all-hands-on-deck spirit kept this cargo moving. And we learned a lot from that COVID time period where the inefficiencies were really shown brightly. We went out and fixed them.
What do tariffs mean for you guys at the port?
Right now, uncertainty.
Okay.
Now, there's a long way from the campaign trail to public policy. We've learned that as well, but we're not being dismissive of what new trade policy could look like. We've heard that maybe it's 10% on all $3 trillion worth of American imports. Maybe it's 60% on China goods. Again, our real strength has been the speed to market variable in the equation, and North Asia has been our backyard.
Right.
Yet, China's business with the Port of Los Angeles has declined from 57% currently to 43%, yet we're still growing because we've been out there chasing the cargo that's moved to Southeast Asia. Shipping companies have put in nonstop service to keep that speed component in play.
You had a dock workers thing, ABC7 Los Angeles in October, and they got a base salary of $81,000, but they're grossing out with overtime $200,000. What's the relationship with the union right now? The unions, plural.
Yeah, strong. Whether it's the IBEW, Carpenters Union, Building and Trades, or our own hometown guys, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union.
Right.
Those guys and their registered permanent employees are up 32% over the last 10 years. We've got 32% more registered dock workers than we did 10 years ago. And they are our bread and butter. They're why the cargo is moving so efficiently.
Are you seeing some of your shippers trying to get in front of the tariffs and shipping goods now? Are you seeing that surge?
Absolutely, yes.
Wow.
In talking to Matt Shea of the National Retail Federation on behalf of his members, footwear, even parts and components for the manufacturing sector, all coming in heavier now because we're not sure exactly what tariffs will look like, and to make sure that they can average that cost down if they are implemented.
A daily gloom here is everybody's leaving California. Gene Sirota's argued, no, they're not. And I get this from family friends who say, you know, I'm sorry, it's not as gloomy as you think. Don't give me the Gavin Newsom 101, but give me the optimism on California versus the exit to Texas.
Yeah, I think it starts with how important we are from a trade perspective. Some will say it's the fourth largest economy in the world. You know, of the working people in the state of California, nearly a third are in the transportation sector. We've got 11 municipal ports, 840 miles of coastline. Trade and our proximity to Asia are so important to that California economy.
I mean, here's the stat, Tom, that Gene has for us. 1 in 9 workers in Southern California, about 1 million people, have jobs tied to the LA Long Beach port.
Yeah, it's like we
I
don't
know I didn't know anything about
foreigners.
that until the pandemic, and Gene started coming on our show in the pandemic, explaining to us how this whole logistic things worked.
I don't really care. Can you get me a reservation at Michael's in Santa Monica?
Oh,
I mean, a guy like you must have all the ability to pick up the phone and make this happen.
I'll
right?
make you one better. Why don't you guys come out and do a remote broadcast from the Port of LA, and then we'll take you around Southern California.
That's what we do. All right, I'll make a phone call.
That's right. Yeah, take the Gulfstream on.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
That'd be great.
Gene, thank you for visiting. What's your number one headache into next year? Don't give me this. Don't give me the PR stuff. What's the biggest challenge you face?
I think it's the uncertainty around trade and
Tariffs.
maybe foreign policy, tariffs included. With this run-up, could we see a huge drop-off after the first half of the year if tariffs are implemented? I want to find out more. That's why I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Washington.
Great, Gene. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Gene Soroka, with the CEO at the Port of Los Angeles, with us today. We greatly appreciate it. Safe travels, Gene, as you can. We're out on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. We had a really piercing discussion today. I thought Ms. Guerra with Morgan Stanley was really something on the congestion tax. We have the surveillance countdown clock to the congestion tax. January 5, John Tucker?
But you know what? It's being challenged in federal court in New Jersey.
Are we there
yet? It depends on what the judge says. If he's going to postpone it, and then Trump takes over in, mid-January?
So there's some
late January.
intrigue.
So who knows?
Well, he's not being anti.
Oh, yeah. Well, at least he said he is. So we'll see. In the meantime, the MTA, they desperately need the money.
Congestion update from our surveillance congestion reporter, John Tucker. Speaking of Texas, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.